Chapter 440. When Jinwan entered, there were already a lot of people inside. The stadium was very large, and many people were sitting on some chairs and sofas. She had seen Mo Jingshan enter the stadium before she came here. At this moment, as soon as Mo Jingshan entered the door, he was invited to sit in the front by several big bosses. Almost all the people who came to this stadium had changed their clothes, and Mo Jingshan also changed out of the suit and trousers he came in. He was tall and straight, and no matter in a suit or casual sportswear, he had an incomparable solemn and cold temperament. "CEOG, I couldn't find you for a long time. Didn't you say you were sporty in the morning? We have been playing here for a long time. Why didn't you come until now?" When a boss saw Jinwan, he came over and pulled her to the other side. "I was basking in the sun on the beach. It was so comfortable that I almost fell asleep," Jinwan explained with a smile. Come on, let's play together. There are so many people here. I won't join in. I was basking in the sun for a long time. I'm afraid I'll get heat stroke, so I'll go to the rest area to sit for a while." "You look fine. Why do you have heat stroke? Come on, play a few shots and exercise." A boss forced a golf club into Jinwan's hand. Only then did Jinwan notice that it was indeed this boss who was playing. Just now, the boss was obviously about to lose and couldn't bring himself to leave. When he saw Jinwan coming, he handed the cue to her and asked her to help him continue. She guessed that since she was a woman and didn't care about losing face, she could help him finish the game, which could be regarded as saving his own face. The other people next to her whistled at Jinwan. "COG, do you usually play golf?" "I don't play much, and I don't play very well," Jinwan replied as she adjusted the club in her hand. "Really? I heard that bosses often play golf at parties and social events in London. CEOG has been in the UK for 3 years. You must have played golf, right?" "Not bad. I've played golf a few times, but I'm not good at it." Jinwan's expression was as usual. "Bosses, please give in to me. Otherwise, if I lose too badly and cry in public like a little girl, I'll lose face." "Ha ha ha, no, CEOG is too humorous, but if we can see the beauty cry with just a few balls, our welfare is too great, haha." Jinwan smiled again and held the cue in her hand. "Then let's continue." At this time Ji Mengran, who was sitting on the sofa in the corner, suddenly came over, took Xing Yihan's cue, walked to an empty seat next to Jinwan, and said while playing with the cue, "Sister, let's play together." The way she called her sister was sweet and intimate, as though the loss she suffered at Jinwan's hands yesterday did not exist. It was as though nothing had happened. Some of the people present knew more or less that Jinwan was Ji Hongwen's daughter, and a few people knew what Jinwan had done in High City in the past. But people who could stand firm in the business world all knew what to say and what not to say. So many things were not spread casually. Besides, Jinwan was no longer the young lady of the Ji family, who could be talked about behind her back at any time. When those who didn't know the situation heard Ji Mengran call her sister, in a sweet voice, they all looked over in surprise. "COG has a sister?" Ji Mengran smiled sweetly at the other bosses. "Yes, hello bosses. You can call me Mengran." Although Ji Mengran's appearance was far from Jinwan's, she was still very pretty. Her skin was also very fair, and she was very good at dressing up. She showed off her good points, and when she smiled, she had the capital to be seductive. The bosses all nodded and were about to say something, when they suddenly heard Jinwan say coldly, "Let's start." Ji Mengran saw that Jinwan's posture of holding the club was not particularly professional. Thinking that she could embarrass Jinwan in front of others, she firmly held the club and was ready to mock her with her golf skills. At the same time, Ji Mengran moved aside, so that the people sitting in the rest area behind could see how Jinwan made a fool of herself in public. When she came over just now, she saw that Mo Jingshan was invited by the big bosses to sit in the back seat, just 5 or 6 meters behind Jinwan. Playing golf was also a very common form of entertainment for the upper class during their vacation time. These bosses liked it very much. More importantly, it was because playing golf could cultivate one's body and mind, and it also looked very handsome. Seeing that the other bosses had already swung their clubs, Jinwan seemed to be adjusting her movements back and forth, not daring to play, Ji Mengran swung her club very happily. However, because she moved too fast and used too much strength, the ball swayed back and forth on the edge of the hole and rolled back, unable to enter the hole. Ji Mengran was a little regretful at first, but then she remembered that Jinwan didn't know how to play golf, and probably didn't see which ball was hers, so she turned to Jinwan smugly. "Sister, are you going to play or not? So many bosses are waiting for you, aren't they?" However, as soon as Ji Mengran finished speaking, Jinwan had already hit the ball forward with the club in her hand. Because she was the last to serve, the bosses who had just finished playing all looked in this direction. It was the ball that everyone was watching. It turned out that it was not as unprofessional and average as Jinwan said. The small white ball shot by Jinwan rushed forward, in a very stable upward arc on the lawn, and accurately fell into the entrance of the hole. It went in. Perfect. Ji Mengran's hand holding the club stiffened. Not bad. CEO G is really too modest. You've obviously practiced, but you still asked us to give in to you. You're clearly the best player in the game. Girls nowadays can't be underestimated. You can already compete with us in the business world. You're so good at playing golf. CEO G, you must have played a lot of golf in London. You're really good. Jinwan just smiled at these words. The so-called PK was to defeat the players one by one, judging the stability, speed, and other aspects of the ball to determine the winner among so many people. Chapter 441. This time, Ji Mengran didn't want to be outdone by Jinwan again. Her serious and professional movements made people feel that maybe she could win. Although Jinwan's performance just now was really amazing, it was probably more of a coincidence and luck. This time, Jinwan and the other presidents served at the same time, and didn't wait for the last one. Seeing that everyone was serving, Ji Mengran hurriedly followed suit. This time, the ball finally entered the hole after swaying in a circle. She was feeling proud of herself when she saw that Jinwan's ball was still the same as before. It fell into the hole steadily, and didn't touch the lawn at all. Another round of applause. Even though Ji Mengran also scored, she was completely outdone by Jinwan's skills. But this time, she had scored, so Ji Mengran wasn't eliminated. She stood in her position again, and tried to block as much of the view behind her as possible. Just now, Mo Jingshan happened to see Jinwan's posture when she played the ball. Thinking about it, she felt very regretful, and could only try her best to block it. Jinwan really didn't understand Ji Mengran's small movements. She just thought that her legs or feet were uncomfortable, and didn't know why she was moving back and forth. The few bosses had been playing for a long time. Seeing that the two sisters were a bit valiant here, they did not continue to play. Instead, they stood behind and watched them play. Seeing that many people had left the arena, Jinwan was not interested in continuing. However, Ji Mengran whispered provocatively, "Don't go. Continue. Let's see how far you can go with your luck." Ji Mengran didn't say anything. Just now, Jinwan's posture of holding the cue was not very good. Obviously, she didn't know how to play. If it wasn't luck, what else could it be? Logically speaking, Jinwan should ignore this kind of provocation. But seeing that the other bosses were looking at her, she thought about it and didn't say much. She picked up the cue again and continued. This time, Ji Mengran's ball circled around the hole twice before finally stopping on the grass. It did not go in. Ji Mengran was so angry that she almost threw the cue away. But Jinwan put it down first, took the mineral water handed to her by a waiter of the resort behind her, unscrewed the cap, and said deadpan, "Don't be so eager to win. All the people present are leaders and big shots of major companies. As a woman, I just need to do what I should do. Why should I compete with so many men who play golf in this kind of entertainment all year round?" That one sentence clearly explained her seemingly unprofessional actions just now. The entertainment venues in London were not as many as the ones in China. Most of the events there were light sports. People there preferred to discuss business while playing ball. Jinwan had indeed learned a lot from Mr. Zand over the past few years, but she had never planned to show it off. Ji Mengran threw herself at the gun. Who could she blame? So many bosses had left to see the two of them. If Jinwan didn't teach her a lesson, Ji Menggran might really think that she could show off her skills here. Ji Menggran turned around and left the stage with an ugly expression. When she went to Sheng Yihan's side, she saw that Sheng Yihan had been sitting there and had no intention of comforting her or helping her. She was so angry that she slammed the pole in front of him. What? You lost? Why do you vent your anger with the cue? Sheng Yihan looked away from Jin Wan, who was still standing there, and turned to look at Ji Menggran's livid face. You lost? Do you want to blame the Q for not cooperating with you? How dare you taunt me? Ji Menggran glared at him unhappily. Sheng Yihan smiled coldly, stroked his chin with one hand, and rubbed his fingers gently across his chin. At the same time, he looked at Jin Wan, who was standing there drinking water. Jin Wan's hair was not as long as it was 3 years ago. Her shoulder-length hair was casually tied into a short ponytail, which looked simple and energetic. She was still wearing a loose beach dress, but unlike the other women present who wore colorful beach dresses that showed off their shoulders and beautiful legs, she wore a white t-shirt and loose trousers. Except for her arms and the part above her neck, all the rest of her beauty was covered by her clothes. There were many kinds of women. Jin Wan's beauty now seemed to be completely different from that of 3 years ago, or when she was a teenager. Her eyes, which were sometimes low-key and sometimes flamboyant, but not at all timid, made men have a strong desire to conquer her. But she was so far away that no one could reach her. Jin Wan put down the mineral water bottle and said a few words with a smile to the other CEOs who were praising her. At this time, a minister in the rest area poured a cup of tea for Mo Jingshan with a smile and said, Now the business world is really not just the world of men. A young woman like CEO Ji is also very outstanding. Mo Jingshan calmly looked in that direction and casually picked up the teacup. He seemed to be deep in thought, but also seemed to be indifferent as he looked at the smiling woman in the crowd. Seeing that Mo Jingshan's eyes rarely stayed on a woman for so long, the minister thought he was interested in this COG, so he immediately continued the topic. It hasn't been long since I took office in High City, so I don't know much about the local affairs in High City. I heard that CEOG was also from High City, but I don't know which family she is from. I'm also very curious about her experience. She has achieved so much before she is 25 years old. She's really extraordinary. Seeing that Mo Jingshan just sipped the tea in the cup calmly, and didn't seem to be annoyed by his words, the minister felt it was reasonable and said, CEO Mo, have you ever met COG? After a year and a half, you will reach the age of independence. No matter how busy the Shine Group is, you should get married and have a family. How lonely it is to be single all the time. How about we find someone to introduce you to? I think COG is very good. If COG knows how you feel about her. Mo Jingshan put down the teacup casually, as if he didn't hear the minister's flattering words and the topic just now, and said flatly, Let's continue talking about the Ministry of Construction and the large stadium. Chapter 442. As the conversation continued, Mo Jingshan calmly sipped the tea in his cup. His gaze had already shifted away from Jin Wan. At the same time, Jin Wan turned to look at the rest area. Seeing that there were still a few empty seats, she was about to go over, when a boss next to her suddenly invited her to sit in the rest area with more empty seats. Jin Wan turned to look over, and saw Mo Jingshan, sitting in the middle with the minister of a certain agency. No wonder there were few people in that row. With Mo Jingshan there, many people didn't dare to get too close to him, even if they wanted to. Didn't you see COMO sitting there? I won't sit there. We're all strangers. It's embarrassing to sit too close to him, Jin Wan said. What's there to be embarrassed about? When CEO Mo first arrived, you almost fell, and CEO Mo helped you up. It's no wonder we got to know each other. Jin Wan. Seeing that she couldn't refuse, although Jin Wan had thousands of ways to refuse, in this situation, she still had to stay in High City, and she couldn't do as she pleased. When she sat down with the other CEOs, the minister who was talking to Mo Jingshan suddenly took a meaningful look at Jin Wan and smiled at her. CEOG, you were really valiant and handsome when you played golf just now. Minister, you flatter me. Hey, how many girls here can be as beautiful and talented as you? The director looked at her with a smile and began to introduce politely. This is President Mo. You should know him, right? Jin Wan calmly turned to look at Mo Jingshan, who was only a sofa away from her, and smiled at him. CEO Mo, how could I not know your name? Mo Jingshan also took a look at her. His eyes were indifferent and emotionless, but his ink-black eyes were darker than the stars in the night sky. Those who had dealt with Mo Jingshan knew that he rarely paid attention to people he didn't know, and he didn't show much affection to strange women, even if the other party was a manager of a company. The people who had just invited Jin Wan began to worry about her. CEO Ji, who had just returned to China, was too young. They didn't know if she could get used to Mo Jingshan's cold treatment. However, when Mo Jingshan's eyes fell on her face, he didn't show any unfamiliarity or rejection of women as he used to. Instead, he smiled meaningfully. Although his smile was hard to read, at least in recent years, Jin Wan was the first woman Mo Jingshan didn't ignore coldly. Among them, there was a CEO who knew that the Mo family and the Ji family had been connected by marriage. Although he didn't dare to say anything, seeing Jin Wan's deliberately strange tone and CEO Mo's ambiguous smile, he couldn't help saying, CEO Ji and CEO Mo don't just know each other. As soon as she said this, the people around her all looked at Jin Wan in surprise. Mo Jingshan was not affected by her words, but still looked at Jin Wan. His eyes made it hard to guess whether he was going to take advantage of the situation to expose their relationship, or simply treat them as strangers like Jin Wan. Looking into Mo Jingshan's eyes, Jin Wan calmly smiled, casually played with an empty teacup on the table, and said flatly, "That's true. Although it's rare to see a big shot like CEO Mo, we've all met in High City. Back then, when our company was just a studio, we had some interactions in High City, but we didn't have many interactions. I guess CEO Mo is so busy that he has long forgotten such a small figure like me." A minister immediately echoed with a smile. CEO G is so beautiful that no man can forget her. No matter how busy CEO Mo is, he must have some impression of CEO G. Don't you think so, CEO Mo? Mo Jingshan didn't respond but glanced at Jin Wan. Jin Wan kept smiling calmly, as if she was meeting a big shot. She was sensible and well-spoken. Finally, the smile on Mo Jingshan's lips deepened, and his tone seemed to be controlling something. It was as though he could easily control someone's lifeline, causing their breathing rate to slow down. He unhurriedly and heavily said, "COG." It was just a short word. He seemed to be playing with the word, questioning something and admitting something. His indifferent eyes and incomprehensible tone made it hard for people to figure out CEO Mo's real thoughts. However, since he called Jin Wan COG, there must be something special about Jin Wan. Otherwise, given Mo Jingshan's temperament, he wouldn't even look at her at this moment. Someone who almost spilled the beans in the back didn't know what was going on between the two of them. However, seeing Jin Wan and Mo Jingshan acting like strangers, he thought he'd better not talk too much. So he just kept quiet and quietly changed his seat to avoid getting himself into trouble. Jin Wan put down the empty teacup in her hand and said indifferently, "COMO?" The people around were all confused. There was a smile on Jin Wan's face, but her eyes were shallow. In the past 3 years, Mo Jingshan had become more taciturn and indifferent, but Jin Wan had become open-minded and casual. After all, before returning to High City, she had thought that High City would not be as peaceful as London. But since she had decided to come back, there was no need to be afraid. Just like now, whether the past was to be uncovered or hidden, at worst, she would just bury it. No matter what happened, she would accept it calmly. Mo Jingshan looked at her indifferent and even smiling eyes, and after a while, he said in a tone as polite and alienated as her. Obviously, he respected the path she had chosen and said flatteringly, "You play well." Jin Wan's smile was dimpled and her eyes were glistening. Her voice seemed to contain a bit of flattery to him, but it was precisely because of this flattery that the distance between them seemed to widen. "Thank you for your praise, CEO Mo. I'm afraid my half-baked playing style is nothing in front of you, CEO Mo." Mo Jingshan raised his eyebrows calmly. And at this time, someone took the opportunity to invite Mo Jingshan to play a few rounds with them. However, Mo Jingshan just sat there quietly and showed no intention of getting up. Go ahead. I haven't finished this pot of tea yet, and I'm not in the mood to play for the time being. Mo Jingshan looked solemn and indifferent, and his eyes had moved away from Jinwan and didn't look at her again. Chapter 443. Jinwan successfully got away from Mo Jingshan's side. Ignoring other people's greetings or coaxing, she directly walked away from the rest area. However, there was a group of people playing bowling on the other side. Jinwan seemed to have taken a break, and someone came to pull her over. Ji Mengran was also there, chatting and laughing with others. She held a bowling ball in her hand and seemed to be about to play. The person who pulled Jinwan over asked her how she was playing bowling. Jinwan still said that she was average. In the end, after playing a few rounds, Ji Mengran's initial arrogance and smugness turned into an ugly expression as she watched Jinwan score higher than her every time. Although Jinwan wasn't at the professional level where she could knock down all the bowling balls with a single ball, she could be considered to be the best among everyone here. She completely suppressed Ji Mengran's performance, which was like a complete novice's. There were a lot of entertainment in the afternoon. There was no one on the beach at this time, so everyone found a volleyball net and played beach volleyball. Ji Mengran refused to admit defeat and asked Jinwan to play beach volleyball with her. When someone asked Jinwan how she was playing, Jinwan smiled. Average. Hearing her response again, everyone basically didn't take it seriously. This time, there was no PK. Most of the people who went to the beach to watch the wonderful performance of the Ji sisters. Of course, every time the joke was on Ji Mengran, Jinwan didn't really show weakness at all. As a woman, she was already very successful in her career, and this year was a fruitful year. Coupled with Jinwan's beauty, many men in the same industry were on Jinwan's side. They saw that Jinwan could handle almost everything clearly, kept a low profile, and excelled in every aspect. In just one day, many men had fallen for her, and they all hoped to see more of her brilliant side. Jinwan's eyes lit up, and her eyes lit up. On the beach, it was almost evening. In the afterglow of the setting sun, Jinwan was still wearing the same clothes. She casually rubbed her wrist and looked at Ji Mengran, who was on the volleyball net. In order to perform well this time, Ji Mengran specially changed into tight sportswear for convenience. However, as soon as Ji Mengran served the ball, Jinwan easily raised her hand and slapped the ball back. Her movement was fierce and fast, not giving her any face at all. Ji Mengran jumped very high, but failed to catch the ball. In the midst of laughter and sighs, she angrily turned to pick up the ball. When she was about to serve, she slapped the ball hard in Ji Mengran's direction. Jinwan gave a cold smile and dodged. Ji Mengran's game of pure entertainment in the resort was ruthlessly played by Ji Mengran. It just so happened that Jinwan didn't intend to be too polite to her. On such an occasion, there was no winner or loser, and there was no professional nature to it. She let the ball roll to her feet, then picked it up with the tip of her foot, threw the ball up, and slapped it at Ji Mengran's face with the beach sand. Ji Mengran had wanted to go up to catch the ball, but the ball came directly to her face. She wanted to dodge but failed. She had just shrunk her neck and turned her face away, but the ball still hit her hard on the head, and she fell to the ground in an instant. Although the volleyball hit people hard, it didn't hurt them. The sand was soft and didn't hurt them. However, Jinwan didn't show any mercy. Jinwan was still stunned by the ball and fell to the ground for more than 10 seconds before she slowly got up. The size of the onlookers were more obvious. They thought Ji Mengran would perform well when she went up to the court so confidently, but she still made a fool of herself. No one was stupid. Initially, they did not see through the struggle between the sisters. However, Ji Mengran kept finding trouble with Jinwan and provoking her again and again. Anyone with eyes could tell that Ji Mengran was just unwilling to accept defeat and kept trying to make her presence known. Jinwan's eyes were filled with dissatisfaction and anger. Obviously, she was inferior to Jinwan in every aspect, but she still wanted to compete with her. The two sisters' temperaments were really different. Forget it, Mr. Ji, don't fight. The tide is about to rise. The people on the beach should withdraw. There's really nothing to see. It's boring. Let's go. Jinwon didn't intend to stay here for long. She glanced at Ji Mengran, who had just got up from the ground, and under Ji Mengran's angry red eyes, she turned around and walked away with the crowd. When she returned to the gym, many people had gone back to their rooms to rest. There were not as many people in the gym as a few hours ago. Jinwon wondered if she should go back to her room to rest. Anyway, she could leave after one more night. She just needed to write some feedback and suggestions about the resort in the name of MN Group. She didn't need to waste too much time here. However, Sheng Yihan had just gone to the beach and brought back Ji Mengran, who looked terrible. Even if he didn't agree with Ji Mengran's troublemaking temper, Ji Mengran lost face here, which was equal to losing face for him and the Sheng family. CEO Ji. Sheng Yihan asked Ji Mengran to wipe her sweat and drink some water. A moment later, he suddenly stopped Jinwon, who was about to leave the gym. Jinwon stopped and looked at the man in front of her. Before he spoke, she had guessed why he stopped her. Today Ji Mengran had made a fool of herself here again and again. Many people could see that Ji Mengran was brought here by Sheng Yihan. Even if he didn't take it seriously, he would feel embarrassed now. Jinwon didn't speak, but her eyes were cold. Sheng Yihan smiled at her and said in a voice that only she could hear, "It seems that you have learned a lot in London in the past 3 years, and learned a lot in the business world and social circles in the UK. Mengran doesn't know how to appreciate your kindness and tries to provoke you. She is indeed immature, but Mengran is brought here by me this time. I can't let her be humiliated by you again and again. Don't you think so?" Jinwon glanced at him. "So what's your plan, CEO Sheng? I've been in this gym all afternoon. No matter how strong my body is, I should be tired. I can't let you two play a game of attrition with me, can you? Do you want to play golf with me again? I'm sorry, I'm not an athlete. Today, this is just an entertainment venue in a resort. Golf is just a relaxing activity. I have no interest in playing this kind of thing with you again and again." Chapter 444. The man standing opposite looked at her with dark eyes, and didn't intend to let her leave so easily. Jinwon narrowed her eyes and didn't look up. "No wonder you two can be together. Birds of a feather flock together. You two are definitely the scum of the scum." Sheng Yihan didn't get angry at her sarcasm at all. He just said, "Do you know how to play darts?" Jinwon smiled. "Are you kidding me? Didn't darts originate from England like golf? I've learned countless things in London in the past few years. Are you really going to let Ji Mengran continue to lose face here? She wants to play, but it doesn't mean I'm in the mood to play with her. It's not Mengran who wants to play with you. I'll play with you." After saying that, Sheng Yihan walked directly to her side, as if he didn't intend to ask for her consent, and had already decided on this game. Jinwon thought for a moment, and turned to see that there was indeed an area for playing darts on the other side of the stadium. There was a row of international darts on the wall, both near and far. But Jinwon didn't play darts much. It was not difficult to hit the darts accurately, but it was very difficult to aim at the center. Moreover, this kind of sport was usually the type that men liked to play. Women rarely touched it. Sheng Yihan was probably really good at it. He was a person who did things quickly and accurately. If he could suddenly stand in front of her and challenge her, he would definitely not be any worse than her. Did he want to win back some face, even if he wanted to shamelessly play with her? Ji Mengran saw that Jinwon accepted the challenge, and Sheng Yihan was playing with the darts in his hand. She suddenly walked over quickly and leaned over to Sheng Yihan. "Brother Sheng, let's play with my sister, okay? You teach me, and I'll play with my sister." With that, Ji Mengran stood in front of Sheng Yihan. There was no special emotion in Sheng Yihan's eyes. When he saw Ji Mengran come over again, there was finally a flash of disgust in his eyes. He saw Jinwon playing with those darts, and didn't seem to be afraid. But from what he knew of Jinwon, he knew she was really not good at it. Then, Ji Mengran insisted that he hold her hand to shoot the dart. It was obvious that Ji Mengran wanted to show off her love in front of others, and save some face. After thinking for a moment, Sheng Yihan put the dart in Ji Mengran's hand, stood behind her, held her shoulders and hands, and taught her how to play the dart. Shall we start? Sheng Yihan turned to Jinwan, who didn't seem ready, and asked. Jinwan picked up a dart at the same time and didn't even look at him. She stood where she was, looking for an angle, and answered coldly, "Suit yourself." She didn't want to come over, but there were so many onlookers here today. Even if she was going to lose, she couldn't have stage fright. Besides, Ji Menggran had made such a big scene, and Jinwan couldn't just leave like that. As soon as Jinwan finished speaking, Sheng Yihan held Ji Menggran's hand and threw the dart forward. It could be seen that he was indeed a veteran, and he did live up to Jinwan's evaluation of him as fast, fierce, and accurate. He shot the dart forward at a very precise angle. But in the end, because Ji Menggran's hand was between his hand and the dart, and because of Ji Menggran's imperfect coordination, when the dart hit the dartboard, it was still a little bit away from the center of the dartboard, which was equivalent to the position of 9 rings. It was a very good result for him to play darts with a novice. Occasionally, there were sparse applause around, but more people sighed disapprovingly. Not to mention how shrewd and cunning Sheng Yihan was in the business world. He was also a man of few words, but couldn't be easily provoked. It was rare to see him with a female companion here, and it turned out to be Cog's sister. Ji Menggran provoked Cog in every way, and now even Sheng Yihan, who was usually calm and collected, was supporting her sister. Many men couldn't bear to watch such a cooperation between a man and a woman, and they couldn't wait to help Jinwan shoot this dart. This kind of event, which was not very suitable for women, was making things difficult for her. If Jinwan showed any expression of needing help, there would definitely be men who couldn't bear to watch it and went to help her. But Jinwan didn't look helpless, nor did she have stage fright, so the men who had seen all kinds of wonderful performances this afternoon didn't dare to go up, lest they would be redundant if she really knew how to play darts. Great! After shooting a dart, Ji Menggran leaned in Sheng Yihan's arms excitedly. Brother Sheng, can we shoot the middle ring? Sheng Yihan didn't look at her but turned to look at Jinwan, saying, "Let's talk about it after she shoots it." Ji Menggran also turned to look at Jinwan, raising her eyebrows and waiting for her to make a fool of herself. Jinwan ignored them, holding the dart and looking at the dartboard in front of her. She had learned a lot from Feng Ling. Although she had only learned shooting from Feng Ling for a few hours, she didn't feel too dizzy with this kind of dartboard, but she was really not very good at shooting. Finally, Jinwan threw the dart. There was no miracle in this kind of thing. After all, she was really not good at it. The dart hit the 5th ring. Although it was very stable, it was 4 rings away from the center, which was enough to show that she was really not good at shooting. Ji Menggran took the opportunity to say excitedly, "Brother Sheng, it's our turn." At this moment, the winner had been decided. Sheng Yihan just wanted to dampen Jinwan's spirit and didn't intend to continue. But at this time, Ji Menggran had picked up the dart, grabbed his hand, and insisted on shooting again. Jinwan still stood calmly by the side, not showing any expression of chagrin or shame because of the failure just now. It was fine to play with this thing. For a novice like her, there was no difference between winning in 1 round and winning 2 out of 3 rounds. But Ji Menggran insisted on continuing, and Sheng Yihan couldn't refuse her in public. He just took a look at Jinwan, held Ji Menggran's hand, and shot the dart forward. This time, Ji Menggran didn't follow and let Sheng Yihan do the work, so the dart hit the middle of the ring. It was a very perfect dart. At this time, the applause was relatively warm, and there were many boos in the crowd. This dart hit, and Sheng Yihan took a step back and didn't continue to hold her. But Ji Menggran felt very proud and turned to look at Jinwan. Seeing Jinwan pick up another dart, Sheng Yihan watched her movements and asked, "Do you need my help, Cog?" Chapter 445. At this time, the crowd also raised their voices, most of them asking Jinwan if she needed help. Jinwan didn't answer. For some reason, the crowd behind her suddenly quietened down. At the same time, she sensed the change in Sheng Yihan and Ji Menggran's expressions. Jinwan paused. Before she could react, she suddenly sensed that someone was approaching from behind. When the person behind her approached her, he directly held her shoulders. At the same time, a familiar yet strange scent lingered around her. Jinwan stiffened, but the man's hand had already reached over from behind, holding her wrist and helping her to adjust her angle. His clear, low voice suddenly rang by her ear. "Don't be nervous." She didn't need to look back. She knew this person was Mo Jingshan. Even though 3 years seemed to be as far as the Milky Way between the two of them, as long as he got close, his scent, his aura, and his voice were enough for her to recognize who he was without even turning her head. Seeing Mo Jingshan, who had been sitting quietly in the rest area, come over and help Jinwan, Jimengran clenched her teeth hard and clenched the dart so hard that her fingers turned white. Jinwan wasn't nervous, but Mo Jingshan's breath suddenly surrounded her, and there were so many people who dared to speak carelessly and looked at them quietly. Her whole body tensed up. Mo Jingshan's hand touched her waist from behind. As Jinwan's body stiffened, he corrected her standing posture. At the same time, as if he was simply teaching her how to play darts, he raised his hand and put it on her neck to help her adjust the direction of her head and the direction of her field of vision. His other hand, which had been holding her wrist, moved up, and his broad, warm palm held her whole hand. "Look at the dot in front. You don't need to twist your body so hard. You can't play darts with just strength. In addition to accuracy, you also need to calm down." The man's voice was almost close to her ear. He held her hand and calmly asked, "Are you ready?" Jinwan looked at the dart again. Yes. The man held her hand and threw the dart. They were both carrying a new bee, but a colorful dart was shot directly at the same central ring. Not only did it hit the center, but it also knocked down Sheng Yihan and Jimengran's dart. It was a complete one-sided victory. The applause was thunderous. Jinwan ignored Jimengran's livid face and the curious eyes of the crowd. She just looked at the ring in the center in the distance. It was as if time had returned to 3 years ago in the 11 base in Los Angeles. When she was not confident in the bullseye 100 meters away, this man had stood behind her and taught her like this. Jinwan's eyes were calm, as if the past had never existed. "Thank you, COMO." Jinwan looked at the dart that was stuck in her heart and abruptly withdrew her hand from the man's palm. She stood in his arms and said calmly and even coldly, "Can you let me go now?" The man behind her was not in a hurry to leave when she didn't speak. However, the moment she finished speaking, he didn't hesitate to hug her and withdrew his arm. When Jinwan turned to thank him, the distance between them had increased by half a meter. "Thank you." Jinwan thanked him again. Mo Jingshan saw the alienation and obvious distance in her eyes and didn't answer. When Jinwan walked away expressionlessly, he looked indifferently at the colorful dart in the center of the ring. Jinwan walked quickly. She was the one who was pushed away by Mo Jingshan. Since he had repeatedly said that he was dead, she naturally chose to accept this cruelest reason. She didn't ask, didn't try to persuade him, and didn't need to fight for him. After returning to High City, she didn't want to have more contact with Mo Jingshan. Perhaps it was not easy for them to meet again. Although she didn't hate this high and mighty Mo Jingshan, he had nothing to do with her anymore. After signing the divorce papers, she didn't plan to see him again. Even if the Yew Garden was smashed, the Yew Garden was sealed, and even if she went to England, she didn't expect to talk to him at such a close distance. Jinwan went straight back to her room. When she entered the room, she found that she was sweating all over. She had been basking in the sun for so long in the morning, and had been playing this and that in the afternoon. After so many exercises, she guessed that she didn't smell so good when she was playing darts. Then she thought of the scene just now, the uproar of the people around when they saw Mo Jingshan holding her to help her, and Mo Jingshan's calm and indifferent eyes from beginning to end. Reuniting after a long time might be exciting, but Jinwan didn't want to mention it. Jinwan entered the bathroom and stood under the water to take a bath. The water was warm. Since 3 years ago, when she almost lost her life in the air conditioning and cold water because of a high fever in that hotel, she had almost never taken a cold bath again. She rarely touched cold water, and no matter how hot the weather was, she would never take a sip of cold water. Because of this, her body was much better. Now when she occasionally had her period, she didn't have that kind of sharp pain in her belly. After the bath, it was already 7:30. It was summer, and the sky had just darkened. But it was not completely dark yet. The resort was still very lively. In recent years, many of these successful people in High City were very young. Unlike the scene she was familiar with in the past, where there were all kinds of 45-year-old uncles with beer bellies all over the world. Some people were barbecuing in the area on the beach where barbecue was allowed. Many people were drinking and chatting, and it was very lively. Jin Wan's room was on the second floor of the holiday villa, which had a huge balcony. She opened the window and walked to the balcony, enjoying the distant sea breeze and watching the group of people barbecuing. They were all friendly faces. Sheng Yihan, Ji Mengran, and of course, Mo Jingshan were not here. The stars gradually appeared on the horizon. Jin Wan sat on the balcony and looked at the night sky, listening to the noisy group of people below. Chapter 446. Seeing Jin Wan sitting on the balcony from a distance, Shen Mu smiled, raised the kebab in his hand, greeted Jin Wan, and motioned for her to come down and eat with them. Jin Wan waved her hand with a smile, and Shen Mu continued to wave at her, and even said something to the people around him. Then the group of people who were barbecuing all waved at Jin Wan, and kept asking her to come down and eat with them. Jin Wan wanted to say that she had just taken a shower, and that she would smell of barbecue if she went down to eat barbecue. But everyone was so enthusiastic. She had just returned to China, and needed to socialize with others. She couldn't be too unsociable, so after thinking for a while, she turned around, took a thin coat, and went out. It was hot, but the sea breeze at night was still a bit chilly. As soon as Jin Wan went over, she was stuffed with a handful of barbecued kebabs. After saying hello to everyone, Jin Wan sat on a bench and chatted with the passers-by from time to time. Shen Mu leaned over, sat beside Jin Wan, and gave her a newly opened can of beer. "Do you want some? I rarely drink cold beer in recent years." Shen Mu nodded and didn't insist. He took the wine back and took a sip. Then, as he ate the meat skewers, he looked at the endless sea in the dark night and said faintly, "Time really flies. In the blink of an eye, 3 years have passed just like that. I really didn't expect Mo." He paused. "I really didn't expect CEO G to have changed so much. The last time we met on the plane back home, I thought that everything seemed to have returned to 3 years ago, and nothing had changed. But now, I have to admit that you are really different from before." He paused just now because he habitually wanted to call Jin Wan Mrs. Mo, but then he suddenly realized it, and called her CEO G. Jin Wan didn't seem to hear the change in his tone. She just smiled and handed him a handful of kebabs. "I can't eat so much. Help me eat." Shen Mu smiled and took it, but he didn't eat it. Instead, he put it on a clean white oil paper beside the bench, and then he sat closer to Jin Wan while drinking. Jin Wan didn't avoid it. Anyway, she and Shen Mu were old acquaintances, and he knew what to do. Shen Mu leaned close and said in a voice that only she could hear, "Are you really not going to have anything to do with COMO?" She opened it and clinked glasses with Shen Mu. After taking a sip, she calmly said, "I've already eaten tonight. I can't eat much right now, so I'll just sit here for a while. Do you need me to drink a few more cans with you?" Shen Mu nodded and said, "I've already eaten tonight. I can't eat much right now." Shen Mu raised his beer and clinked it with hers. Seeing that Jin Wan's attitude was so resolute, and that she did not even intend to continue this topic, he did not say anything more. After the two finished a can of beer, Jin Wan no longer drank or ate. She sat there, enjoying the sea breeze, and watching the lively crowd by the barbecue. Now hai ji mu of nua he ji and a ji. A mu shun a and in one ji ji he he. On her way back, a young man happened to pass by her. The two walked to the holiday villa in that direction, chatting casually as they walked. As they approached the villa, Jin Wan accidentally stepped on a pebble that had rolled over from who knew where, and almost fell again. The person by her side reached out to support her. Jin Wan smiled, thanked him, and pulled her hand out of his grasp. Just like this, they exchanged a few polite words. The man's palm seemed to still feel the touch of the white, soft wrist he had just held. Seeing Jinwan's bright smile under the lights of the holiday night, he suddenly asked, although it's a little impolite to discuss a woman's age, COG, you're at the marriageable age now, aren't you? Jinwan's expression didn't change. Really? Nowadays, many women don't plan to get married after the age of 30. How old am I? How can I be considered marriageable? Haha, I mean I haven't heard that COG has a boyfriend. I don't know if COG has been keeping a low profile. So you haven't made your relationship public. Or are you still single? Jinwan raised her hand with a smile and shook her fingers gently, meaning to keep it a secret. I can't say. Do you really have a man you like? Is he not in the business circle, so it's inconvenient to introduce him? Jinwan still had a mysterious smile on her face, successfully stopping the man from saying that he wanted to pursue her. Knowing that she might not be single, the man couldn't say anything more but politely and regretfully said some blessings. After sending Jinwan to the door of the villa, he said goodbye and turned to go to the nearest holiday villa. Seeing the man leave, Jinwan raised her eyebrows, took off the thin coat stained with the sea breeze, held it in her hand, and turned to walk into the villa with a relaxed look. However, as soon as she walked to the door, she saw a figure standing there. She paused, and the moment she raised her eyes, they met Imo Jingshan's gaze. She was met with a pair of dark eyes that were both familiar and strange at the same time. Jinwan froze. When she walked over, she didn't notice that Imo Jingshan was here. There were many villas in this resort, and there were many people living in each villa. She really didn't know which one Imo Jingshan lived in. After all, he didn't stay here last night. Although she saw Shinmu tonight, she instinctively thought that Imo Jingshan had left. But he was just standing there. It was obvious that he had overheard the conversation between her and the man as they walked. Jinwan paused for a moment, and then came back to herself. She thought he was just passing by and happened to meet him. She nodded politely and indifferently to him, but she didn't call him COMO, nor did she call him by his name. Imo Jingshan just stood there and didn't move because of her nod. Jinwan caught a glimpse of a cigarette between his fingers. Although it had been lit, he was not in a hurry to smoke. There was white smoke swirling in front of him, and the man looked at her through the smoke, his eyes clear. In Jinwan's impression, Imo Jingshan smoked, but he seldom smoked, or she had never seen him smoke after being with him for so long. She didn't expect that he would carry a cigarette with him now. Chapter 447. In the past, she had rarely smelled the scent of tobacco on Imo Jingshan's body. The smell of tobacco was not bad on a clean and clear man. In the business circle, smoking and drinking were common, not to mention a man like Imo Jingshan. He didn't need to be persuaded to drink or smoke. As long as he didn't want to touch, no one could force him to touch. But now he actually carried a cigarette with him. Jinwan also raised her eyes in the smoke and saw him standing there, looking at her indifferently, as if looking at someone who had nothing to do with him. But if she really had nothing to do with him, he probably wouldn't even bother to look at her. His dark gaze seemed to be because of what Jinwan and the man had just talked about, such as whether she was single or in a relationship. In order to avoid being pestered, she habitually didn't deny it, but she didn't expect there would be a third person here. Looking at the man's dark eyes, Jinwan thought for a while and looked away. She didn't feel it was necessary to explain anything and walked past him. However, the moment she walked past him, her arm was suddenly held. She paused and turned to see that Imo Jingshan was still standing there, but he suddenly held her hand. Feeling the warmth of his palm, Jinwan didn't struggle, but turned her eyes to him. "COMO, please be careful. Please let go of me." Imo Jingshan also looked at her. There was no extra attitude in his eyes. He just looked at her expressionless face under the light and said coldly, "Did you go to have barbecue just now?" Jinwan did not answer. Instead, she abruptly pulled her hand back, but the man was still holding on to her. He did not need to exert any strength, but he was still unable to release her. She saw that in his other hand, the end of the cigarette between his fingers was flickering. Only a small amount of smoke lingered in front of his elegant and deep eyes. The man casually threw the cigarette, but into the special trash can in the smoking area not far away. He didn't show any eagerness because of Jin Wan's silence, but still said indifferently, "It's not good to eat barbecue so late. Go ask the staff for some digestive tablets." "Thank you, CEO Mo. I didn't eat much. I just went to sit for a while." His tone was ordinary, neither cold nor warm. But Jin Wan clearly kept her distance from him. She did not give in at all, and her tone was exceptionally strange. Hearing her words, Mo Jingshan just glanced at her indifferently. At this time, some people happened to come out of the villa opposite. They turned out to be two leaders from the province and the city, who seemed to be looking for Mo Jingshan. The two leaders said, "I'm really sorry. CEO Mo, we asked you to come here for a chat, but we made you wait for so long." It turned out that Mo Jingshan had arranged to meet these two leaders here. No wonder he was standing here at this time. Mo Jingshan looked back at the provincial leader and let go of Jin Wan's arm. When the municipal leader saw Jin Wan, he just nodded politely to her as a greeting, and then stood by Mo Jingshan's side and whispered something. Mo Jingshan nodded and talked with the provincial leader who came over. He didn't look at her again. At this time, the people standing at the door were all big leaders. Jin Wan smiled at them. From her point of view, she could only see Mo Jingshan's smile when he talked to the two people next to him, looking noble and elegant. She had wanted to go back to her room to rest, but there was nothing for her to do here, so she simply turned and went upstairs, quickly disappearing from their sight. The next morning, the activities in the resort were over. Many people had to catch early flights, so they left very early. Jin Wan didn't get up late, but it was already 7:30 in the morning when she packed up and was ready to leave. When she attended the exhibition, she parked her car in the parking lot near the exhibition center. Later, she came here in a car sent by the resort. Her car was not here, and this seaside resort had not been open to the public. There were newly built roads nearby, and there were no cars passing by. The road was very empty. When Jin Wan went to sleep last night, she forgot that there was no car nearby. She should have called someone from the exhibition center to drive her car here, or asked Xiaoba to drive her car here in advance. But now it was too late to call someone. Jin Wan looked around the gate of the resort for a while, holding a small bag in her hand, walking slowly on the empty flat asphalt road, preparing to cross this road to see if she could get a taxi. At the same time, she was looking for the number on her cell phone, thinking that if there was no taxi, she should ask Xiaoba to help her call one. At this time, the sound of a car engine suddenly came from behind. Jin Wan subconsciously looked back. It was a black Bugatti, tall and spacious, which was particularly eye-catching on the empty asphalt road. She looked at the empty road nearby, and then at the approaching car behind her. The black Bugatti came closer and stopped next to her. Jin Wan was puzzled and turned her head, only to see the window of the driver's seat rolled down. The driver was Shin Mu. The moment she saw Shin Mu, she instinctively glanced in the direction of the back door of the car. "CEOG." Shin Mu smiled at her. "Didn't you drive here?" "The car is in the exhibition center. I forgot to ask someone to drive it here for me. The road in this seaside resort is newly built, and cars outside haven't been allowed to pass. It will take at least 30 or 40 minutes for you to walk to a place where you can get a taxi. The weather is so hot, and it's more than 30 degrees early in the morning. How can you walk there on foot? Won't you get heat stroke?" "It's all right." Jin Wan gently raised the cell phone in her hand. "I can call someone to pick me up. It'll take a long time to get a taxi. Where do you live now? Or do you want to go directly to the MN Group building in High City? Get in the car. I'll send you back." "No," Jin Wan refused with a smile. "Go back quickly. Thank you." She was talking about them. Although this car was driven by Shin Mu lived here with Mo Jingshan last night. At this time, he naturally couldn't leave alone, so Mo Jingshan must be in the car. Seeing that Jin Wan had no intention of getting in the car, Shin Mu said again, "It's on the way from here to the city. It'll be a waste of time if you call a taxi here." "It's all right. I ate too much in the morning, so I can walk on the road. Anyway, there are no cars on this road. It's very safe." Shen Mu. At this time, the window of the back door of the black Bugatti rolled down, revealing Mo Jingshan's cold face. Chapter 448. At 8:30 in the morning, Jinwan returned to the MN group. She came back in Mo Jingshan's car. During the hour in the car, except for Shenmu who asked her if she was tired walking on the asphalt road in high heels, and Jinwan answered him casually, the car was silent. When they arrived at the office building of the MN group in the west of the city, Jinwan thanked him and got out of the car. Fearing that Xiaoba and Xia Tian would find out whose car she had taken, she got out of the car quickly and decisively. Seeing Jinwan's speed when she entered the company, Shenmu wondered if she was being chased by a ghost. How could she walk so fast? As soon as she returned to the office, Xia Tian's voice came from outside the door, and she began to mutter. Didn't you say you would only stay in the resort for 1 day after the exhibition? Why did you stay there for 2 days? If I had known it would be so long, I would have prepared 2 more sets of clothes for you. Did you only bring 1 set of clothes? Did you hang around with those big shots in the resort for 2 days without wearing any clothes? Jinwan went to the break room to change her clothes, and when she came out she said, a vacation is a vacation. I just chatted casually. It doesn't matter what I wear. There are beach clothes in the store, so I bought one. Xia Tian frowned. Then did you drive back by yourself? Jinwan didn't answer. She sat down at her desk to rest for a while, then raised her hand to pick up her bag, and was about to take out her cell phone, when her fingers touched the cold blue diamond in her bag. She remembered that when she was in the car, she almost took out the blue diamond and gave it back to Mo Jingshan. But in the end she held back. At that time, it was quiet in the car. Mo Jingshan had been looking at the company documents in the car, and didn't mean to talk to her. It seemed that he just sent her back as a favor. Although the atmosphere was too quiet, it resolved the awkwardness of being in the same closed space with him. She didn't want to break the peaceful atmosphere. Once the blue diamond started a topic, it would not be so smooth on the way back. Besides, Shenmu was in the car. Jinwan couldn't just return the blue diamond to him. In the end, she endured this impulse all the way. When she came back, looking at the blue diamond, Jinwan raised her hand to rub her forehead and sighed. Seeing Jinwan's silence, Xia Tian's gaze fell on her bag. That day, when I helped you put on the necklace, I was in a hurry and didn't have time to ask you where this blue diamond came from. I've never seen you wear it before. Could it be that you've always left it at home? It couldn't have been a gift from someone in England, could it? Jinwan put the bag aside. I received this before the divorce. Who do you think sent it? Hearing this, Xia Tian's eyes immediately lit up. She moved closer to the desk and asked, who did you meet at the exhibition? Did you see CEO Mo? When you were at the resort, wasn't President Mo there? As he spoke, he leaned closer with a gossipy expression, carefully observing Jinwan's expression. Jinwan smiled and hit the nail on the head. So from the beginning, you and Xiaoba knew that I would meet him, and you did it on purpose? Seeing her ungrateful attitude, Xia Tian snorted. I can see that you've never been interested in other men. You can't always be single. Now MN Group is quite stable in all aspects. You don't need to work so hard. It's time to consider your relationship. If you still can't let go of COMO, there's nothing to let go of. It's all in the past. Jinwan lowered her eyes and looked at the things on the desk. Who sent these documents? Seeing that Jinwan was about to go straight into work and didn't want to talk at all, Xia Tian smiled at her and narrowed her eyes. I just heard the girl at the front desk say that you came back in a black Bugatti. Although this kind of luxury car is common in high city, your car isn't a Bugatti, right? Where's your car? Whose car did you come back in? Jinwan held her forehead in silence and leafed through the documents at hand. Seeing her stubborn attitude, Xia Tian sighed. What did we say when we were both single? Either we stay single together, or we get married and have children together. Now I'm about to give birth to a child. What about you? You don't even have a man close to you. If you really don't want to have anything to do with the people from before, then why have you always been so cold to Mr. Vince? He's good in all aspects, and he's been waiting for you for more than 3 years. Tell me you. Jinwan shook her head. I don't like men who are too shrewd. Then why didn't you refuse him earlier? I refused him, but Mr. Vince just pretended that I didn't say that and didn't pester me again. He just occasionally invited me to dinner, or helped me occasionally. He didn't make me hate him as a pursuer. I didn't even have a reason to drive him away. So you mean that as long as these excellent men learn to restrain themselves in front of you, and don't make you hate them, you'll actually like them? Jinwon had never thought about this. At least, she had never considered the problem of love in recent years. Right now, I'm not interested in men, so don't worry about it. I've just come back to China, and you and Xiaoba are already busy playing matchmakers for me? Do you not want me to live a peaceful life? Jinwon rolled her eyes at Xia Tian. Xia Tian snorted. Xiaoba said that although you've experienced brilliant things in England these years, you're obviously lacking in love. Especially in the first year, you often stared out of the window in a daze, as if you couldn't even hear people calling you. Xiaoba and I were thinking that we should get you married before the age of 25. Otherwise, it's really difficult for a career woman like you to find a suitable man with looks, money, and capital. In a few years, when you're older, it'll be even more difficult to find a man. Xia Tian's last sentence was held back in her mouth. She thought about it and didn't say it. What she wanted to add was, furthermore, she's divorced, and her ex-husband is someone like Imo Jingshan. Who knows who would be able to marry her? She couldn't say this. Looking at Jinwon's current attitude, if she said this, she would inevitably be kicked out. She wouldn't be able to enter MN Group's office building until she gave birth and finished her confinement. After all, she had worked hard for MN Group for so many years. If she angered Jinwon overnight and was kicked out, it wouldn't be worth it. Chapter 449. Xia Tian glanced at her. You agreed to it yourself. I didn't force you to go. Besides, it would be even better if the person was Imo Jingshan. Jinwon didn't answer. At this time, the boss of Hung Cheng came to MN Group in person, saying that he wanted to see Jinwon. Jinwon answered the phone and took a look at Xia Tian. When did Hung Cheng's people come? They came yesterday. I didn't want to disturb your vacation, so I didn't call you. Jinwon nodded and said no more. She closed the documents in her hand and got up. Tell them to wait for me in the reception room. The boss of Hung Cheng is still upset because of the two men who humiliated him last time. Yesterday he came with his men. Are you sure you want to see him in person? Jinwon didn't speak and walked out of the office. When she came to the reception room, she saw the boss of Hung Cheng, who was just a burly man in his 40s. He was bald and wore a big gold chain around his neck, looking like a typical nouveau riche. She had thought that the people of Hung Cheng were very capable, but it turned out that they were just relying on the imposing manner of their boss. As soon as Jinwon came in, the boss of Hung Cheng threatened to beat her up, but Jinwon just stood by the door calmly and looked at the boss and his men. She shook her fingers calmly as if counting. The boss of Hung Cheng stopped and glared at her, asking, "What the hell are you counting?" Jinwon said calmly, "I'm counting how long it will be before your company goes bankrupt." The boss of Hung Cheng froze. He came here in person today because the government had turned against him and put pressure on his company. He was so angry that he came to meet Jinwon, who was said to be very young. However, he didn't expect that the security guards in the reception room had already begun to scuffle with them. But this slender woman was so calm that it made him feel guilty. Seeing that they had stopped fighting, Jinwon walked over and glanced indifferently at the security guards with minor injuries on their faces. Yesterday, before you came here to find me, you must have been warned by the government, right? Did you come here to make trouble because you have nowhere else to go and want to get some benefits from me? Or just want to come here to demonstrate your power? By the way, I almost forgot to tell you that although our MN Group started in the real estate industry, we have been doing more network technology projects in the UK in recent years. Although MN Group is located on the west side of the city and doesn't look very big, we even have surveillance cameras in our lounge, not to mention such a large reception room. She sat down at the table, put one hand on the table, curled her fingers and slowly and gently tapped on the table. I'll report the number of injuries on our security guards one by one. Besides, you should know why you didn't meet me in the company yesterday. I was invited to the seaside resort with the leaders of the province and city, and there are only a few people who can talk to the leaders of the city. Are you sure you want to make trouble for me? If I'm in a bad mood, I'll be so angry that I won't let you go, and you won't even have a chance to catch your breath. Do you think I'll tell you who will be the unluckiest one? The boss of Hung Chung was stunned. Jinwan said, "The domestic real estate industry is now in a very critical period. The government's regulation needs the cooperation of all the major companies. Although Hung Chung has a strong capital chain, it doesn't know how to keep a low profile in this industry. Standing in front of you are many more sensible and obedient companies that the government wants to support, not just our MN Group. Hung Chung has been occupying all the land for the past 3 years, and the government has been dissatisfied with you for a long time. Now it's just a matter of time. You know what will happen to you. Now the land is full of new rich people, and your company has long lost its momentum. A wise man submits to the times. If you let go now and admit defeat to the government, you may be able to save your company's brand. If you're too late, I'm afraid." The domestic real estate industry was indeed a mix of dragons and snakes. A few years ago, although all the major forces were on the rise, there was a property bubble for more than half a year later. Many people sold everything they could and ended up suffering heavy losses. Now all the big shots in the industry wanted to get a piece of the pie. Those who could stand firm might be able to stand for a while, but if they just wanted to stand firm and wanted to snatch meat from the government, then they really had lived too long. The boss of Hung Chung Group didn't expect that a young woman like Jin Wan would say these words. Instead of calling the security guards and the police in a panic as he had expected. But these few words were enough to make him loosen his grip on the security guard's clothes. He hesitated and looked at Jin Wan again, only to find that she was still sitting there coldly and indifferently, showing no intention of escaping in this messy situation. The boss of Hung Chung saw that she pushed open the door of the reception room and came in alone. Except for the security guards who came in at the beginning, she didn't bring anyone with her. She was so calm and composed, which meant that she must have talked to the leaders of the province or city. She must know some of the plans of the people above, which was why she was so confident. Thinking of this, the boss of Hung Chung glared at Jin Wan again. "Little girl, you're very bold." Jin Wan smiled. "I dare not. It doesn't matter whether I'm bold or not. What matters is who can see the current situation better. In this world, you can't win by playing tough. Even if you take your men to tear down my MN Group today, you won't get any benefits. If you want to vent your anger, you can, but you'd better invest your money in the right places instead of going against MN Group for such a failed tender document. It's okay to go against us, but don't forget that the person behind us is the person you can't defeat. If I remember correctly, your Hung Chung Group should have been invited to the exhibition I attended these 2 days, but it was cancelled at the last minute. What's going on?" The boss of Hung Cheng's face darkened. Obviously, he knew that he was about to be abandoned by his superiors, and that he couldn't even take care of himself. Chapter 450. Xiaoba had just called the police, but before the police arrived, when she rushed to the reception room, she saw the boss of Hung Chung leave with a red face. Xiaoba looked outside the door in surprise for a while. When these people left, she hurried in, only to see Jin Wan sitting in the middle of the reception room, calm as if nothing had happened. "Boss, are you all right?" "I'm fine. Did you call the police?" "Yes, I saw you stay inside and didn't come out. I was afraid something might happen, so I called the police." Jin Wan nodded. "All right. Let them go to the police station to make a statement, and let the higher-ups know. It's also a show of strength to them, and they won't come to MN Group to behave atrociously in the future." Xiaoba didn't quite understand what she said, but seeing that Jin Wan didn't seem to be frightened at all, she thought that Jin Wan had encountered all kinds of problems in London in recent years, and always handled them well. It seemed that she worried too much. 2 days later, the boss of Hung Chung went to the government to plead for leniency. Obviously, he no longer deliberately targeted MN Group. In less than 2 days, Hung Cheng's forces in High City were disbanded. Even the boss of Hung Cheng didn't dare to come out again, let alone the others. MN Group finally calmed down. On the weekend, Jinwon didn't go to the company during the day. She cleaned the house alone, went to the supermarket to buy some food, and made a perfect lunch at home. In the afternoon, she did yoga for more than an hour. As she was finishing up on the floor, she suddenly received a phone call. She rolled on the carpet and directly rolled to the sofa. Then she sat up and picked up the phone on the coffee table. "Hello, Miss G, this is Vince." The man's voice came from the phone, accompanied by the sound of the car brakes. "I've made a reservation at the restaurant tonight. I'm free in the afternoon, so I came to pick you up." Jinwon grabbed the cell phone, got up, ran to the window, and saw that Mr. Vince's car was parked downstairs. "Didn't you say 5 o'clock in the evening? It's only 3 o'clock. Jinwon glanced at the time. "It hasn't been long since you came back. Didn't you say that you would move after a short rest? I came to see if you have anything you need to move," Mr. Vince said simply. "Can I go up and sit for a while?" From a distance, Jinwon saw the door of the car open, and Mr. Vince in a suit got out of the car. But he didn't rush into the apartment. Instead, he looked up as if to find out which apartment Jinwon was in. "Then wait a moment, I'll go down." Mr. Vince could tell that she didn't want him to go up to her apartment. He sighed with a smile. "I can't do anything to you in broad daylight, so I came to see what things you need to move. But you didn't even want me to go up. My house is in a mess. It's not convenient for me to entertain you now." Jinwon said simply and hung up the phone decisively. Mr. Vince sighed with a smile and put his phone in his pocket when she rejected him so decisively. Sure enough, 10 minutes later, Jinwon went downstairs. She had changed her clothes, and her shoulder-length hair was blown back by the wind. She looked natural and beautiful without any makeup. She looked more beautiful than many women with delicate makeup on the street. Other girls your age go out for dinner or a movie on the weekends, but you've been cooped up at home on such a nice day. You've only come downstairs now? Mr. Vince asked with a smile as he opened the car door. "No, I went to the supermarket in the morning, but I just bought some things and went home." Jinwon sat in the car and said, "The restaurant you booked can't go to until 5 o'clock in the evening. You came so early, and my house is in a mess. It's not convenient for you to go in. We can't just sit in the car and chat for 2 hours, can we?" Mr. Vince looked at her with a smile. "If you agree, I'd be happy to chat with you in such a small space for as long as you want." Jinwon glanced at him and withdrew her gaze. "Anyway, we're going to the business street tonight. I know a good coffee shop there. I used to buy coffee there when I was still running a studio. The taste is very good. Why don't we go there and have a seat?" Okay, let's go." Jinwon fastened her seatbelt. Seeing her energetic look, Mr. Vince smiled and turned the steering wheel. When the car drove out of her apartment, he asked, "Have you decided where you want to move to? Near your company in the West City District, or somewhere else with good scenery and air?" "I haven't had time to think about it recently. Anyway, it's enough to have a place to live for the time being. I usually take time to go back to the G family to accompany my father. As for moving, although it was in my plan, I've almost given up on it. I really don't have time to choose a house. The dozens of villas built by BGY Group in the suburbs are not bad. Shall I help you buy one with the best scenery?" "There's no need. The buildings your company usually builds in the city take up too much space. Most of them are built around the suburbs, although the air is good and suitable for many rich people. People like me who can't even be bothered to drive are more suitable to live near the company. I have a few apartments in the West City District. They've been renovated, but I haven't lived in them before. One of them is very close to your company. If you haven't decided where to move to, you can move to my place first. There's really no need. I won't charge you for the room. If you move in, I'll hand all the keys and room cards to you. It's not like I can just barge in. What are you afraid of?" Jinwon smiled. "I heard that you came to High City because of BGY Group's work. You weren't originally from High City. Now you actually have so many houses here. But the West City District is a little too remote. Why do you have an apartment there? If I tell you the truth, I'm afraid you'll hide even further." "Will I?" Chapter 451. It turned out that not just a few apartments, but many apartments near her company that she might live in. Jinwan's heart was not really made of iron. Even if she couldn't accept it emotionally, she would still feel touched and guilty in her heart. After all, for the past 3 years, he had been sent to England from time to time, and he often went to London to help her. The reason why she had been able to go so smoothly in the past few years was indeed because she had many benefactors. Although Mr. Vince had not been in London for very long, he had helped her a lot, and often helped her a lot. "Let me treat you to coffee today." Jinwan paused for a moment and raised her voice to say, "Every time I want to thank you, I say I'll treat you. But every time I treat you, you rush to pay for me. Neither of us is short of money, but I may really owe you a lot in other ways. I have to find the simplest way to pay you back." Mr. Vince was silent for a moment, and then chuckled. "If you can stop treating me like an outsider, I'll pay you back. This is a separate matter, and can't be counted together. You treat me to dinner tonight, and I treat you to coffee in the afternoon. This is reciprocity." Reciprocity? Mr. Vince suddenly stopped the car, and turned to look at Jinwan, who was sitting in the passenger seat. "Dear Miss G, the reciprocity I hope is much deeper than this." Jinwan raised the corners of her lips and smiled, but she didn't reply. Mr. Vince continued driving. After finding a parking space near the commercial street, he said, "You refused to accept the bracelet I gave you last time. So my mother, who suddenly came back to China, saw it at home. She kept asking me if I fell in love with a girl, and insisted that I introduce her to her. She wouldn't leave until she saw that I have a stable and soon married woman by my side. Do you think I'm really old enough? If I don't get married soon, my parents' hair will turn white from worry?" Jinwan seemed to understand something from his words, and turned to look at him. "You specially invited me out to dinner tonight. Do you want me to meet your mother?" Mr. Vince rubbed the space between his eyebrows in distress. "I did have that intention, but I didn't dare to carry it out. How could I force you like this without your consent? Is your mother still in High City?" "Yes, she also knows that I'm going to treat you to dinner tonight, and she keeps saying that she wants to see you, but I stopped her. Although I didn't say anything about our relationship, she insisted that I had a girlfriend and didn't tell my family. This woman starts to worry about her children when she gets older, and now she's especially worried about her children's marriage. I really can't dissuade her," Mr. Vince said as he signaled for her to get out of the car. After getting out of the car, Jinwan took a look at the cafe not far away, and then at Mr. Vince, who had just gotten out of the car. They smiled at each other, and pointed in the direction of the cafe, meaning to tell him that this was the cafe she was talking about. Jinwan turned and walked over, not noticing the black Bugatti parked on the other side of the parking lot, and the black ghost at the back that was familiar to her at a glance. After entering the cafe, the two of them sat down in an empty seat near the bar on the first floor. Jinwan asked for an Americano, and Mr. Vince asked for the same as hers. It was just a leisurely afternoon. Jinwan talked about some interesting things that happened when she was in London, and some events that Mr. Vince was involved in. The two of them chatted happily. Suddenly, a well-dressed elderly woman came over. As soon as the woman came over, Mr. Vince, who had been talking casually, suddenly froze. He looked at the woman, and then at Jinwan, who was confused. The old, beautiful woman gave Mr. Vince a wink, and then looked at Jinwan. She asked in confusion, "You're this lady, right?" Jinwan took a look at the beautiful woman. Seeing her eager and excited eyes, she seemed to understand something, and nodded politely to the woman. "Hello, Auntie." At this moment, Mr. Vince was no longer as calm as he usually was in front of her. He coughed helplessly and awkwardly, put down the coffee cup, and looked at the beautiful woman with a slightly reproachful expression. "Mom, why did you follow us?" Jinwan. Sure enough, he did follow her all the way here quietly. The beautiful woman smiled and sat down next to Mr. Vince, then looked at Jinwan with a smile. "Girl, how old are you this year?" Jinwan. 24. 24? Alas, you're 10 years younger than my son. My son is used to living alone. He hasn't married or brought a girlfriend home since he's in his 30s. His father and I live abroad all year round, and don't have time to come to see him. It's rare for me to come back to see him. When I finally found that he seemed to be in a relationship, he hid it from me. Fortunately, I found that he didn't seem to be going to work when he went out today, so I secretly took a taxi and followed him. I saw him pick you up, and then the two of you came here for coffee, and I finally saw my future daughter-in-law. Cough cough. Jinwan choked on her saliva, which tasted of coffee. It was so bitter that she coughed twice in a row, and her cheeks turned slightly red. Seeing this, the beautiful woman blushed. Ignoring Mr. Vince, she reached out to hold Jinwan's hand on the table and asked with a smile, "Girl, what's your surname?" "Auntie, you may have misunderstood. Mr. Vince and I are not like what you think." Chapter 452. If Jinwan had known that the bracelet would cause such a big trouble, she would have accepted it even if she had to ignore her conscience. But from the looks of it, Mr. Vince's house should have very few women's belongings. Otherwise, his mother wouldn't have thought of so many things just because of a simple bracelet. It could be seen that he was a very clean person. Xia Tian always said that she should have such a person by her side. Although she really didn't need a relationship, Mr. Vince was really a good man. Seeing Jinwan's awkward and amused expression, Mr. Vince said, "Miss G is the CEO of MN Group. She just came back from England. Although we often contact each other, it's not what you think." "Why is it not what I think? If it were another woman, I wouldn't be so sure." Seeing Jinwan's awkward expression, the beautiful woman withdrew her hand and said to Mr. Vince, "Your bracelet is engraved with the letters JNUAN. You just called her Miss G. Didn't you give it to her?" Mr. Vince didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "This is a misunderstanding." "What misunderstanding? Are you afraid that your father and I will ask you about these things all day after you have a girlfriend?" "Don't worry, after today I won't ask anymore. But since we've met, let me get to know this Miss G better." The beautiful woman then looked at Jinwan with a smile. "Miss G, right?" Jinwan slightly smiled. "Auntie, you really misunderstood." The beautiful woman clicked her tongue. "You two really have a tacit understanding. My son has never been interested in women. Since your name is engraved on that bracelet, it shows that he really cares about you. And since you two have your own achievements in your careers, it's good that you can help and support each other. The man is 10 years older than you, and he loves you more. The man is handsome, and the woman is beautiful. You two are really a good match." With that, the beautiful woman took off a green bracelet from her wrist and took Jinwan's hand to put it on for her. "This is the first time I met you, so I was in a hurry and didn't prepare a gift for you. This jade bracelet is a good thing I got from an antique friend not long ago. It just so happens that you don't wear any jewelry on your wrist. Let's take this bracelet as a gift. Next time you come to our house, I'll prepare a gift for you." "Auntie, no. Mr. Vince and I are just business partners. To be honest, we're just friends." Jinwan hurriedly pulled her hand out. But Mr. Vince's mother was not only well-dressed but also strong. She put the bracelet on Jinwan's wrist. Mr. Vince could have reached out to stop her, but he didn't. Seeing that things had come to this point, he simply took advantage of the situation and didn't say anything more. He just looked at Jinwan. "Since my mother has given it to you, just take it. It's just an ordinary bracelet. It's not a particularly meaningful or tacky heirloom. It looks good on you." Mr. Vince looked at the green bracelet on Jinwan's slender, white wrist and said with a faint smile, "Yes, I've never seen a young girl look so good on this kind of jade bracelet. Miss G, your skin is really white. It looks good on you." The beautiful woman also had a look of admiration on her face. It was as if this bracelet was enough to ensnare her future daughter-in-law. Jinwan's wrist was indeed very thin. The bracelet was put on easily and taken off quickly. She took it off and put it on the table. "Auntie." Jinwan's eyes were gentle, and her voice didn't mean to make the best of a mistake. "My relationship with Mr. Vince is really ordinary. If you insist on doing this, I'm afraid I can't sit here and drink coffee anymore. After all, we are business partners. In the future, we will meet frequently in the business world. It's too embarrassing to mess up our relationship like this." Seeing that Jinwan didn't seem to be joking, the beautiful woman looked at the jade bracelet she put on the table. looked at Jean Wan, who was serious and patient enough to explain, and then turned to Mr. Vince. This? Mr. Vince raised his hand and rubbed between his eyebrows. He didn't know whether it was because of Jean Wan's refusal that gave him a headache or because of his mother, but he just said, "Mom, to tell you the truth, I did plan to give the bracelet to her. But if I want her to be my girlfriend, I have to win her heart. I'm still pursuing her, but unfortunately, I haven't won her heart. Miss G is just Miss G, not my girlfriend." The beautiful woman paused. Haven't you won her heart yet? Mr. Vince spread his hands helplessly. Your son's charm doesn't work on her. She just wanted to invite Mr. Vince for coffee, but it turned out that such an occasion was really inappropriate for Jean Wan. Auntie, Mr. Vince, you talk. I'm going to the bathroom, Jean Wan said politely, picked up her handbag on the table, got up, and walked into the coffee shop. When Jean Wan came out of the bathroom, she thought that Mr. Vince and his mother should have explained enough, so she just needed to go back and chat casually. It shouldn't be too embarrassing. Just as she was about to go over, she suddenly saw a figure coming down from the second floor. Behind him were two well-known financial figures in the industry, who also came down. How could she meet Mo Jingshan in such a place? Jean Wan stood behind a glass wall and didn't go out. She watched the backs of Mo Jingshan and the two financial people walk out of the coffee shop. When they walked to the parking lot, she saw that Shen Mu had been waiting there for a long time. At this moment, she caught a glimpse of a familiar black ghost and a black Bugatti parked in an inconspicuous place in the shade of the parking lot. It turned out that they had been here a long time ago, but she hadn't noticed them. Just now they were upstairs, and she was downstairs. Mo Jingshan shouldn't have seen her, right? Jean Wan walked out from behind the glass wall. She didn't mean to avoid Mo Jingshan, but she was really unprepared to meet him in this coffee shop. Not to mention the scene just now was really embarrassing. Chapter 453. She glanced at the parking lot and the two cars outside, pulled over a waiter next to her, and asked, "Sir, where were those gentlemen sitting just now?" The waiter looked her up and down. "Ah, miss, do you mean Mr. Mo?" Jean Wan immediately glanced at the waiter thoughtfully. "Do you know him?" In the past few years, Mr. Mo would often choose to meet with friends or important people here to discuss work. As long as Mr. Mo is here, all the private rooms on the second floor will not be open to the public. Just now, Mr. Mo was sitting on the second floor railing. He has been there for a long time and just left. The waiter said politely, "Miss, you found it too late. If you wanted to say hello to Mr. Mo, you could have done it 10 minutes earlier, but now he has left." Listening to his words, it seemed that when Mo Jingshan came here, people would often try to find an opportunity to greet him or introduce themselves. This waiter was already used to people like her, who were inquiring about Mr. Mo. But at this moment, Jean Wan was silently looking in the direction the waiter had pointed out. Wasn't the place on the second floor, right above where she had just sat? Furthermore, the second floor of the cafe wasn't completely enclosed. From the railings on the second floor, one could have a clear view of all the customers and activities on the first floor. Just now, when she was below them, not only did he see their every move, he probably also heard a lot of their conversation. So he saw everything she said and did to Mr. Vince and Mr. Vince's mother just now? Jean Wan looked outside again. Seeing that Mo Jingshan's car had driven away, she returned to the seat in front of Mr. Vince and sat down. Mr. Vince's mother must have felt embarrassed and left when Jean Wan went to the bathroom, but the bracelet was still on the table. "I'm sorry for what happened just now." When Jean Wan sat down, Mr. Vince chuckled. "Although I did intend to push the boat with the current, fortunately, you didn't fall out with me." Hearing his words, Jean Wan didn't say anything more. She just smiled. "Auntie is very interesting, but you're really old enough to get married. From your words, it seems like you've never intended to be my marriage target." Jean Wan had made it clear, but she felt she should emphasize it at this time. "You know, I don't intend to think about this for years, Mr. Vince. Since we're sitting here talking about this, let's make it clear. I can be business partners or friends, but I'm afraid I can't have a deeper relationship with you. I hope Mr. Vince can look elsewhere and don't waste your time with me. Mr. Vince looked at her for a while, chuckled, and didn't say more. He gestured for her to put away the jade bracelet on the table. Since my mother has decided to give this bracelet to you, she can't take it back. Take this bracelet. Even to a friend. I should give you some gifts occasionally. I didn't even take your bracelet. This bracelet belongs to your mother, so I won't take it back. You'd better take it back and give it to someone you should give it to. You're always like this. In the past 3 years, I've tried to get closer to you several times in London, but every time I took a step forward, you took a step back. If I get closer to you, I'm afraid you'll avoid me even more. He looked at her face. Jinwan, why do you do this? Since you went to the UK after a divorce, it means that your previous relationship and marriage are over. Why do you keep your relationship empty? If I'm not the type you like, I'll accept it. But you just refuse to let any man get close to you. How can I be reconciled with that? Whether you are reconciled or not, it doesn't matter. Jinwan looked at him as usual. If you want to continue the dinner tonight, I'd better advise you to regard me as a good friend, Mr. Vince. Otherwise, I'm afraid I'll have to leave before 5 o'clock for dinner. Mr. Vince knew Jinwan's temper. He had been rejected by her countless times, and was used to her thorn-like attitude when faced with this kind of question. At this moment, seeing Jinwan so resolute, he looked into her eyes, smiled, and understood why she refused him so bluntly. In fact, Jinwan had wanted to have a good talk with Mr. Vince. In recent years, Mr. Vince had been really good to her, and she didn't want to let him down. But perhaps because Mr. Vince's mother let Jinwan see her true heart, she really refused him in her heart. So there was no need to leave any room for ambiguity. It was almost 5 o'clock when they walked out of the coffee shop. Before Jinwan walked to the parking lot, she subconsciously looked back at the coffee shop behind her. She clearly remembered that Mo Jingshan didn't like to drink coffee. In fact, she didn't like it very much either. However, when she worked in the studio, she often passed by this place and would buy some coffee for her colleagues. She gradually got used to drinking here and gradually became a regular customer. But why did Mo Jingshan come here so often in recent years? In the evening, after dinner in an Italian restaurant, Mr. Vince invited her to go to a movie with him. She could see that Mr. Vince's original purpose today was to promote their relationship, but he was embarrassed by Jinwan. But she still had to carry out the plan. Besides, the theater had been booked. If she didn't go, she would be letting down Mr. Vince's kindness. Anyway, she had said what she should say, so she didn't refuse to go to the movie. There were only 2 people in the VIP theater, in the center of High City. Mr. Vince must have asked Secretary Yang for the way to go on a date. When he went in, he bought popcorn and Coke for Jinwan. Jinwan smiled and thanked him. After entering, she focused on watching the movie. The 2 of them sat in their seats and didn't say anything. The movie lasted for 2 hours. It was a good Hollywood blockbuster. When they walked out of the theater, it was already 10 o'clock in the evening. Chapter 454. In order to get a kiss, do you have to learn this kind of dating method of eating and watching a movie? This kind of young way is no longer suitable for people of your status. The scene of a general manager of the BGY group, who is worth hundreds of millions of yuan, holding 2 buckets of popcorn and Coke into the cinema. I find it incredible. Jinwan said as she took out her cell phone to check the time, and her fingers inadvertently touched the photo album. Last time when she accompanied Ji Hongwen to the temple, she took a picture of the so-called perfect long stick she drew with her cell phone. The golden perfect circle fell into her sight. Until now, she hadn't understood what the so-called original life trajectory and the new life trajectory meant. But because the master said the word perfect, she felt it should be a very good sign. So she took a picture of the long stick with her cell phone before leaving. She had planned to find time to ask other people who could interpret the long stick, but after taking the picture, she forgot about it. Now that her fingers inadvertently opened the photo album, she remembered it. Not looking at Jinwan, who was staring at her cell phone, Mr. Vince sighed with a smile as he drove. The point is that you never accepted all kinds of expensive gifts I gave you. I wondered if you had a more down-to-earth heart, so I tried various ways to win you over. But in the end, it didn't work. Are you very depressed? Jinwan casually slid her fingers through the photo album and said with a smile. Yes, depressed. At this time, Mr. Vince had parked the car in the parking space downstairs of her apartment. He turned his eyes, looked at the fair little face in the darkness of the car because of the light from the cell phone screen, casually put his hand on the steering wheel, and asked jokingly, So do you want to give me a consolation prize? Jinwan's mind was still on the long stick in the photo album on her cell phone. For a moment, she didn't know what to say, but instinctively felt that they had arrived home. She raised her eyes from the cell phone and glanced at him. What consolation prize? With that, she looked out again. But I really should thank Mr. Vince for your hospitality today. I'm really ashamed of you to be picked up and escorted by a car. Before Jinwan could finish her words, she suddenly felt a warmth on her cheeks. She froze, and the brightness of the phone made her face even more obvious. She turned around abruptly and saw that Mr. Vince had already returned to the driver's seat, his hands on the steering wheel, and said with an indifferent and gentlemanly smile, This kind of face-to-face kiss is very common in Western countries. It's not like you haven't seen it in London. I'm not asking for much. Besides, I didn't ask you to reciprocate with the same courtesy. This kind of consolation prize shouldn't be too much. An imperceptible coldness flashed across Jinwan's eyes. She immediately turned off her phone, and the anger in her heart was concealed by her calm expression. When she was in England, she had met a man who suddenly hugged her and kissed her on the cheek. But that kind of foreign man was really just expressing his courtesy and love. Although Mr. Vince insisted on associating the kiss on the cheek with a kiss on the cheek, Jinwan thought about it and did not say anything in the end. She put the phone back into her bag and pushed the door open as if nothing had happened. Before getting out of the car, she said, Thank you for today. With that, she closed the door. The car window was suddenly lowered, and Mr. Vince looked at Jinwan's expressionless face. Are you angry? Jinwan responded, I am a little angry, but after all, we are adults. This kind of kiss on the cheek is not taking advantage of me. I can't be angry with you because of this, Mr. Vince. After all, you did help me a lot in London these years. Even if I don't owe you anything, I still have some feelings for you. Mr. Vince could tell from her tone that she was about to fall out with him, but was obviously restraining herself. So he got out of the car and walked up to her. I'm sorry. It's just that you refused me too straightforwardly today. Every man has a desire to conquer. The more you resist, the more instinctively I want to approach you. I was rude just now. It doesn't matter, but I've almost said what I wanted to say today. In the future, we'd better not see each other except for work. He apologized again. Sorry, I can give you time to calm down, but apart from work, I still hope to maintain a friendship with you. This kind of thing won't happen again. It's late. Mr. Vince, go back early. Jinwan didn't say much, but directly asked him to leave. Mr. Vince knew that she was not making a mountain out of a molehill. It was just that she was too principled in this aspect. If she could be easily approached by anyone, she would have been surrounded by countless men in the past 3 years. He had been careful not to take a step forward for 3 years. Maybe it was because the stars were too beautiful tonight. Or maybe it was just because his heart was moved. Just now in the car, he kissed her if he wanted to, but he didn't expect to be treated so coldly. All right. He didn't say more and gave her time to calm down. Before turning back to the car, he thought for a moment and turned back to look at Jinwan, who had turned and was about to leave. He wanted to say something, but Jinwan had already walked away without looking back. Mr. Vince looked at her back and sighed with a smile. A woman who went to another country because of the failure of her last marriage and had completely closed her heart was really difficult to conquer. But people were such cheap people. Although they knew that there might not be any result, the more they couldn't have, the more they liked it. Mr. Vince drove away. Jinwan walked through the lawn and the beautiful green park decorated by the property management. She looked at the time. It was almost 11 o'clock at night. No wonder there was no one around. Hearing that Mr. Vince's car had left, She glanced back and saw several cars parked in several parking spaces downstairs. However, she couldn't see the models and license plates clearly in the dark. She only vaguely saw the silhouette of a familiar car, but she didn't take it to heart. She turned around and went straight into the apartment building. She went in and found that it was dark inside. Even the elevator had stopped. She remembered that the lights in the neighborhood were not on. No wonder it was dark everywhere. Chapter 455. The property manager said that an emergency repair team had gone over, and it was expected to be repaired in an hour. So Jin-won hung up the phone. Since it could be repaired in an hour, Jin-won planned to wait until it was repaired before going upstairs. But it was already 11 o'clock at night, and there was no one around. Her cell phone had less than 10% of battery left, which was not enough to last for an hour. She lived on the 15th floor. She could climb the stairs, but she would probably be so tired that her legs and stomach would tremble. Standing there for a while, Jin-won turned on the flashlight on her cell phone, and with this light and the last few percent of battery left, she went straight into the escalator passage. Fortunately, she was not wearing high heels today. When she climbed to the 8th floor, she stood still and gasped for breath for a while. But she couldn't stop to rest when climbing stairs at such a high speed. If she stopped for a while, it would be harder for her to climb up. She leaned against the railing and panted for a long time before she lifted her heavy feet and continued to walk up. When she reached the 13th floor, Jin-won felt that her chest was about to explode. She felt that she might die if she climbed 2 more floors. She gritted her teeth and finally reached the 15th floor. She was so tired that her legs and stomach were trembling, and she staggered weakly to the door of her apartment in the dark. The little battery on her cell phone had been used up after she passed the 10th floor because of the power consumption of the cell phone. She walked up the next few floors in the dark. Now there was no battery, and the fingerprint lock and room card were useless. She put her cell phone into her bag, then rummaged back and forth in her bag for a long time before she found the door key in the hidden compartment. She took out the key and was about to open the door when she suddenly smelled a faint smell of smoke. Her hand, which was holding the key, paused. In the darkness, she instinctively looked toward the other side of the staircase. She only saw a red spark flickering on the tip of a person's finger. Someone was actually smoking here in the middle of the night. It was so dark that she couldn't see anything clearly. She could only vaguely see a tall man walking down the escalator between the 15th and 16th floors towards her step by step. Jin-won subconsciously clenched the key. She couldn't see anything in the dark, but she had heard of all kinds of robberies or murders in China over the years. It was so late and dark. If she opened the door, she would invite thieves to her home. But the elevator couldn't work without electricity, and the corridor was dark. This apartment had 1 unit per floor, and there was only 1 unit on each floor. There were no neighbors or people who lived opposite her. If something happened to her here, it would be impossible for her to call for help. Who? Jin-won asked coldly to show that she was not to be trifled with. However, the other party didn't seem to be frightened by her at all. She even heard him chuckle, a faint chuckle that came from his chest. She clenched the key in her hand, thought for a while, and was about to ask him what his purpose was. If he wanted money, she could give him some money. After all, it was important to stay alive. In this world, only a fool would try to show off. Whether to call the police or not, she had to save her life first. But before she spoke, she saw the man casually throw the cigarette to the ground, and the spark was trampled out by him. In the empty and quiet escalator passage, there was a hissing sound that made her heart tremble. For a moment, Jin-won wondered if he was a neighbor who had forgotten to bring his keys or someone else. She wondered if she should ask him if he was here to rob her to avoid any misunderstandings. However, the man's figure had approached her in an instant. Just as she was about to cry for help, he pressed her heavily against the door. "What are you doing? Help, ugh." The moment her body was imprisoned against the door, her voice was abruptly sealed by the man's kiss before it could make much noise and power. The cool taste mixed with the smell of tobacco immediately sealed her lips. Jin-won's mind went blank. She had just climbed 15 floors and hadn't recovered yet. At this moment, her legs were weak and trembling. She instinctively raised her hand to push him away, but she was firmly pressed by him. The kiss on her lips was so aggressive that she couldn't distinguish it for a moment. Her heart was trembling violently. She was about to defend herself with the method Feng Ling had taught her. But the moment she raised her wrist, the man seemed to have predicted it. He raised one hand to hold her wrist, pressed her hands to her sides, and kissed her lips fiercely. Taking advantage of the time when she had just climbed up the stairs and was weak, he easily opened her lips. The man's kiss became more and more aggressive, but Jin Wan, who had been desperately trying to resist, gradually calmed down. She leaned weakly against the door. At this moment, not only was she so tired that her legs were tangled, but now all the blood in her body was trembling. She was so flustered that she couldn't tell who the man in front of her was. But even if her vision was affected by the smoke, such a kiss, such entanglement, and such a smell were all familiar. She stiffly leaned against the door without moving, but the man kissed her even more fiercely than when she was struggling. It was as though he wanted to bite through her lips and swallow her into his stomach. He kissed her deeply. Jin Wan was so tired that even breathing felt pain in her lungs. At this moment, she was deprived of all the air. She was kissed so hard that she saw stars and could barely stand against the door. Seeing that she was no longer struggling, the man firmly nailed her to the door, held her waist with one hand, and fixed her face with the other, not giving her any room to escape. He kissed her wantonly, as if he wanted to make up for all the emptiness in the past 3 years at this moment, until he tasted a trace of blood. He didn't know if his tongue had been bitten by her, or if her lips had been bitten by him. But the moment the faint taste of blood filled their mouths, his kiss became gentler. He slowly absorbed the sweetness in her mouth, as if he was pitying her, but also as if he couldn't control himself. Even if it was blood, he was willing to endure it. Jin Wan was kissed until the man finally let go of her lips and pressed his forehead against hers. As if suppressing or restraining himself, he leaned against her and slowly calmed his breathing. Her lips were stained with the coolness of the air in the dark corridor. She could finally breathe. Chapter 456. There was not only the smell of tobacco on the man's body, but also the smell of alcohol. Although it was not strong, it was indeed the smell of alcohol. As if he didn't care whether she recognized him or not, the man imprisoned her body and said in a low, clear voice close to her, "What did you call me?" Jin Wan leaned back. COMO, he pressed his forehead against hers, his nose against hers, and his lips almost pressed against hers again. But because Jin Wan moved back, there was a little distance between them. He didn't move closer, and the lights in the corridor suddenly came on. Jin Wan was dazzled by the sudden light and narrowed her eyes slightly. She was not used to the sudden light, but at the same time, she saw the man in front of her clearly. Mo Jingshan was dressed in a suit and leather shoes, but the collar of his shirt was unbuttoned. He still looked as sanctimonious as he had in the coffee shop during the day. But who could have thought that the dignified COMO of Shine Group, who was known to be pure and ascetic, would come to his ex-wife's house in the middle of the night and kiss her until her legs were weak while the power was cut off. The point was that this ex-wife was thrown away by him. Jin Wan really wanted to laugh, so she did smile at the man in front of her. It was cold and indifferent, without the slightest warmth. Even though her lips were a little red and hot, and looked particularly seductive, her smile was still distant and indifferent, and her eyes were full of mockery. It was not the first time he heard her call him COMO. In the exhibition center, in the resort, she called him COMO naturally and skillfully. Mo Jingshan gazed into her eyes. They were like a pair of black pearls reflected in the clear spring water in a secluded valley. They were clear and clean, sparkling and bright yet cold. The woman's eyelashes fluttered under the light. Slowly, it was as though she had long learned how to move people's hearts. He let go of her and took a step back, still looking as indifferent, as if everything was under his control. Looking at Jin Wan, who had to lean against the door to stand, he slowly said, "Call me that again." Jin Wan said, "COMO, did you come to me to pretend to be crazy because you were drunk? Your alcohol tolerance isn't something an ordinary person can compare to. You're so drunk that you can't even tell reality from the faint smell of alcohol on your body? I should call you President Emo no matter what. What else do you want me to call you? She paused and suddenly sneered. Mr. Emo? Emo Jingshan stared at her with a heavy and deep gaze. Putting aside the honorific title, even the surname, won't you? Jinwan chuckled. Not suitable. His cold eyes narrowed slightly. What's inappropriate? She replied. Neither is suitable. He slowly put one hand into his trouser pocket and stood half a meter away from her. He could see her whole image and looked at her coldly. Is it suitable with someone else? It seemed like he had seen her being mistaken as his daughter-in-law in the cafe and being kissed in the car at night. No wonder. She couldn't even recognize the car he parked downstairs. It was the same ghost, but she couldn't recognize it because of the power outage. Jinwan steadied her breath, leaned against the door, and didn't look at him with her eyes half closed. She just lazily looked as if she were just catching up with an old friend, and didn't feel a sense of crisis when a man approached her door. What are you talking about, CEO Mo? I don't think I understand. She glanced at the cigarette, but on the ground again. CEO Mo should know what a non-smoking area is. You took advantage of the power outage to smoke in front of my house. Without electricity, you can't trigger the fire alarm system, but you're so happy to release secondhand smoke in my house. With that, she took out the key from her bag again. Because her legs were weak, she leaned against the door and turned the key in the keyhole, saying, I just climbed 15 floors and still have no strength. If CEO Emma wants to do something to me, I'm afraid I can't stop him. When she finally opened the door, she remembered that the electricity had been turned on, and she could get in by pressing the password. She paused. Forget it. This way, he wouldn't see the password of her door. Otherwise, she might not be able to live here anymore. The door opened, and Jinwan walked in with weak steps. She raised her hand and turned on the light. Seeing that the man didn't intend to come in, she smiled coldly at him. CEO Mo, have you sobered up after kissing me? Do you know what you were doing just now? With that, he slammed the door shut with a bang, cutting off their line of sight. After entering the door, Jinwan threw her bag to the ground, bent down to rub her legs, and staggered to the sofa to sit down. Damn it, 15 floors was really not something ordinary people could climb. It was really killing her. After resting for a while, her legs were still numb. Jinwan leaned against the sofa with her eyes open, and suddenly remembered something. She took out her cell phone from her bag, and put it on the coffee table to charge. After looking at her cell phone for a while, her eyelids couldn't support her eyelids anymore. So she leaned against the sofa, and closed her eyes to sleep for a while. Jinwan didn't wake up until her cell phone suddenly fell to the ground. She looked at the empty living room in confusion, and then at the time. She had slept on the sofa for an hour. Sitting on the sofa, she thought for a while, put down her cell phone, got up, walked to the door, and looked out through the peephole on the door. At this moment, there was no one outside. She was in a daze just now, and now she woke up with a start. For a moment, she even suspected that the Mo Jingshan who appeared in the corridor of her apartment might not be real. But her calves were still numb, which meant that it was true that she had climbed the 15th floor. Jinwan pushed the door open and looked out. Sure enough, the corridor was empty, and even the cigarette, but on the ground, was gone. She looked thoughtfully at the empty corridor, paused for a while, raised her hand to rub her temples, and turned to close the door. However, he suddenly stopped in his tracks and looked at the empty corridor again. He was gone, and the cigarette butt had been taken away, but the faint smell of tobacco still lingered here. Even though it was very faint, this was a non-smoking area, and no one dared to smoke here under normal circumstances. So, it was true. At this moment, Jinwan's head hurt even more. She closed the door, raised her hands to rub her temples hard, and returned to the sofa to sit down. Perhaps because of the sudden climb to the 15th floor, she felt uncomfortable in all aspects. Her legs, feet, and head hurt. After a while, she thought of going into the bathroom to soak her legs and feet in hot water for a while to relieve her fatigue. Chapter 457. MN Group recently needed financing for a new project. Although the company had enough funds, Jin Wan was determined to get this financing. The real estate studio that Sheng Yihan helped Ji Mingran to open was also interested in this large amount of financing led by KW Finance Center. Now the real estate industry in High City had been growing. If Ji Mingran could get this money, she would have a little capital to compete with MN Group in the short term. At least in the real estate industry, she could make some profits. It was because Ji Mingran coveted this financing that Jinwan didn't intend to let go of it. A week later, Mrs. Su, the person in charge of KW's financing center, arrived in High City. Ji Mingran got the news from Sheng Yihan, so she made an appointment with Mrs. Su in the name of the Sheng's group. She wanted to have a good chat with Mrs. Su and see if she could get the financing. But what Ji Mingran didn't expect was that Mrs. Su had already told MN Group when she was still abroad and made an appointment with Jin Wan on the same day. When she learned that Ji Mingran and Jin Wan were sisters, she made an appointment with the three of them to meet at the World Trade Center in High City. Mrs. Su was a woman in her late 50s. She was one of the more famous successful female entrepreneurs in the financial world. She invited two young girls to go shopping together. Of course, this was the nature of women. No matter how old they were, shopping and shopping were the best ways for women to communicate. Jin Wan and Mrs. Su had met each other in London, so they were familiar with each other. When she learned that Mrs. Su also invited Ji Mingran to go shopping together, she knew that Mrs. Su wanted to see the difference between the two sisters and who could win her heart. After all, they were in the same industry and the same investment. As long as they could make money, she could invest in either side. Besides, Jin Wan was not a person who was particularly short of investment, so Mrs. Su had some considerations. Ji Mingran was different. When she learned that Mrs. Su had invited her and Jin Wan to go shopping at the same time, she was furious. She had been suppressed by Jin Wan for too long, and she had been humiliated too many times in the resort. This time, she really didn't want to be suppressed by Jin Wan again. So she dressed up and had to defeat Jin Wan in terms of momentum. However, when they arrived at the World Trade Center, Ji Mingran was afraid that she would be late, so she arrived an hour early. Before Mrs. Su arrived, she went shopping and bought a watch worth more than 1 million yuan to give to Mrs. Su. Finally, at the appointed time, Ji Mingran went to the shopping center to wait, only to see Jin Wan and Mrs. Su getting out of the car. Ji Mingran came with Mrs. Su to ask for financing, but she came in Mrs. Su's car. Ji Mingran took a deep breath. When Jin Wan and Mrs. Su got out of the car, she hurriedly greeted them with a smile. "Hello, Mrs. Su. I'm Ji Mingran, the head of Mingran Studio under the Sheng Corporation. This is the first time we meet. I've been waiting for you. I didn't expect you to come on time, Mrs. Su." Mrs. Su took a look at her, smiled kindly, and turned to Jin Wan, who came with her. "I went to the financial building in the morning for a meeting and happened to meet CEO G. CEO G reminded me that I had an appointment here this afternoon, so I came with you. Otherwise, with my bad memory, I guess you would have to wait for a long time." Ji Mingran kept smiling. "Really? I was wondering why CEO G came in Mrs. Su's car. I was wondering why she didn't drive her own car." Jin Wan didn't deliberately walk around Mrs. Su. After walking up the marble steps in front of the shopping center, she looked at Ji Mingran's clothes and said, "Mingran, since you're wearing all your belongings, aren't you? On such a hot day, you've even put on a Chanel coat? Do you have any misunderstanding about this 35-degree weather?" Mrs. Su also smiled and looked at Ji Mingran. After all, she didn't know Ji Mingran very well. She just thought they were teasing each other, so she gave Ji Mingran a way out. "Miss Mingran, are you afraid of the sun? Are you allergic to ultraviolet rays? Is that why you wear a coat in such a hot day?" Ji Mingran saw the way out and immediately followed. "I'm really afraid of the sun, but I don't dare to show it like CEO G. I've been sunburned before, so every time it comes to this kind of weather, I'll wear more." Mrs. Su nodded and invited them into the shopping center with a smile. "Let's go in first. It's really hot outside. You'll feel more comfortable in the air conditioner." Jin Wan curved her lips. Her face was full of smiles. Ji Mengran took Mrs. Su's arm and walked in, saying, "Is this the first time you've come to High City, Mrs. Su?" "No, I've been here once when I was young. The reason why I agreed to your invitation is that I had some business dealings with your father, Chairman Ji, when I was young. Chairman Ji is a good man, and I used to get a lot of help from him in business. So when I just came to High City this time, I received an invitation from you two at the same time. So I decided to let you meet him together. At that time, you were still very young, so I guess you didn't have any impression of me," Mrs. Su said and looked back at Jin Wan. "But CEO Ji, we talked in the car just now. I really didn't expect that the willful and domineering Miss has now become a capable person in the business world. When I saw you in the financial building today, I was surprised and marveled at the changes that time has left in people." Jin Wan smiled as usual. "People always change. I was willful and domineering just because I was too young. Now I've grown up, and I've cultivated in the melting pot of the business world. Of course, I've changed a lot." Yes, that's true," Mrs. Su said and took Jin Wan's hand again, whispering in a very low voice as if whispering, "At first, I thought Mengran was obedient and sensible and had a bright future. But I didn't expect you to be even more unpredictable. Now you're really a beautiful girl. No one can match your achievements." Chapter 458. Seeing that Ji Mengran had directly led the topic to investment, Mrs. Su glanced at her with a smile. "Since you are also in this industry, why don't you think about supporting MN Group with your sister? By the way, Chairman Ji is getting old. You will inherit the family business sooner or later. Now CEO Ji has the MN Group, so she can't leave it. In the future, the Ji's group will fall into your hands, right?" If Ji Hongwen really planned to give everything of the Ji family to Ji Mengran, she wouldn't have to follow Sheng Yihan around every day, nor would she have to look for investments. The crux of the problem was that after Ji Mengran disappeared for more than a year, although Ji Hongwen still recognized her as his daughter, he lost his temper because of her deliberate disappearance. And because of what she had done to Jin Wan, he was so angry that he said that in the future, the Ji Corporation's assets would be divided up rather than be wasted by her. Ji Hongwen was so angry that he said that in the future, he would rather divide the Ji Corporation's assets than let her ruin it. Ji Hongwen probably planned to let Jin Wan manage the J's. MN Group was so big now. If the J's was added to it, Jin Wan would be even more powerful. Thinking of this, Ji Mengran felt upset, but she couldn't do anything to Ji Hongwen now. Anyway, the J's was still there, and Ji Hongwen's health was fine. When Jin Wan's identity was officially exposed, it would not be so easy for her to take over the J's. "Mrs. Su, my father is only in his 50s. Although there are a lot of trivial things in Ji's company, and he is very busy, he can still support the company for another 10 or 20 years. It's too early to say that he will inherit the family business. Besides, if he wants to inherit the family business, he has to rely on his ability. He has to experience in the business world for a few years." Ji Mengran said, "That's why I want to open a studio so that I can work hard, so that I won't be unfamiliar with the G's business when I take over the G's." Mrs. Su nodded. "Yes, you're right. Although the G's doesn't seem to be as glorious as it used to be, its business foundation in various cities in China is still there. It's not so easy to deal with all kinds of things. It's also a good thing to practice in the business world more." Speaking of this, Mrs. Su smiled and looked at Jin Wan, who had been very quiet. "CEO Ji, you don't talk much. Now you are the only one in the Ji family. Don't you have anything to say?" Jin Wan calmly smiled. "I'll just listen to you and Mengran talk. As you said, MN Group is already under great pressure in my hands. Even if I have enough opportunities to train in the business world, I'm afraid I won't be able to leave, so I haven't considered the Ji Corporation. But I'm not sure if I can train in the business world. Even if I have enough opportunities to train, I'm afraid I won't be able to leave." After all, MN Group is now involved in many industries, and they are the most profitable ones both at home and abroad. If Mengran needs to use the Ji Corporation, I definitely won't compete with her. Ji Mengran felt that Jin Wan was taking a step back, but when she listened carefully, she could clearly sense the contempt Jin Wan had for her. Using the Ji Corporation to support her meant that her current studio wouldn't last long and wouldn't have any big development at all. So she would have to go back to the Ji family and live on the Ji Corporation's property? Hearing this, Mrs. Su chuckled. That's true. MN Group is really a dark horse in the Chinese business world in recent years. CEO Ji has dominated the internet technology industry and the real estate industry in recent years, which shows that you have a good eye for business opportunities. I'm very confident in MN Group. Ji Mengran had a bad feeling when she heard this. She hurriedly took out a delicate square box from the boutique bag she had been carrying in her hand and said with a smile, Mrs. Su, I was too busy chatting just now and almost forgot that this is a gift from me on behalf of our studio. Oh, a gift? Mrs. Su looked at Ji Mengran with a kind smile. You're too polite. Why do you give me a gift? As soon as Mrs. Su's voice fell, Ji Mengran had opened the box. Inside was a Patek Philippe watch that had recently been on the market, which was very delicate and expensive. Mrs. Su just took a look at it and didn't reach out to take it. She looked at Ji Mengran's clothes and the bag worth hundreds of thousands of yuan in her hand and said with a smile, Miss Mengran is really generous. This watch is not cheap. It's not very expensive. I just want to give it to you as a gift for our first meeting. I hope you like it. Mrs. Su looked at her tenderly for a while, raised her hand, gently closed the watch box and didn't take it. Then she turned to look at Jin Wan. Both of you came to talk to me about investment today, but I led you to talk about the old days. Let's go upstairs and have a good talk with me. Jin Wan nodded. Jin Wan nodded and made a pleased gesture, letting Mrs. Su enter the elevator first. Seeing that Mrs. Su didn't intend to accept it, Ji Mengran hurriedly followed her into the elevator and asked carefully, Mrs. Su, do you not like this watch? Or do you not like to wear it? I can also give you other things. Do you like some antiques, calligraphy and paintings or something else? Mrs. Su looked at her and said with a smile, I won't accept anything. I just came to see you two for the sake of Chairman Ji. I have my own plans for investment. You don't have to keep trying to please me by giving me gifts. Since the studio is so short of investment, you'd better return this watch worth more than 1,000,000 yuan. There's no need to be so generous. Don't embarrass yourself. Ji Mengran's expression froze. Jin Wan glanced at her and said indifferently, Mrs. Su, what you mean is, since you're here to ask for investment on behalf of the studio, what you should do is to explain the strength of your studio clearly. Do you think Mrs. Su is short of such a Patek Philippe watch or antiques, calligraphy and paintings? With Mrs. Su's financial resources, she must have bought whatever she likes by herself. Naturally, she won't need anything in particular. You don't have to work hard in this regard. Ji Mengran immediately glared at Jin Wan. Jin Wan glanced at her leisurely and coldly. Her lips were still indifferent with no sharpness to be seen. But seeing that Mrs. Su didn't refute Jin Wan's words, Ji Mengran clenched the bag in her hand, slowly put down her hand, and gave up the plan to continue sending gifts. Chapter 459. When Mrs. Su was finally annoyed, and the smile on her face gradually became less patient, Jin Wan said, Madam, MN Group has invested in 2 Hope primary schools in the province. If you have time tomorrow, may I accompany you to see the children in the Hope primary schools? Mrs. Su immediately looked at Jin Wan in surprise. Does your company also do charity? Jin Wan smiled. Although MN Group, as you said, dominates all major industries, not everyone can do charity. MN Group has always insisted on doing charity and has sponsored many children abroad. In the past 2 years, many Hope primary schools have been built in China under the name of MN Group. But not all of them are in High City. We have a special charity working group, which is distributed all over the country. The smile in Mrs. Su's eyes disappeared, and she nodded with a smile. Not bad, not bad. Seeing that the topic was diverted again, Ji Mengran sneered and said, Since MN Group even has the money to do charity, I don't think it is short of investment. Jin Wan glanced back at her. Mengran, Based on the fact that you can buy a watch worth more than 1,000,000 yuan, and the clothes you're wearing add up to more than 1,000,000 yuan, your studio doesn't lack money to the extent you say. We're in the same boat. Although MN Group had the advantage, Jinwan deliberately said, we're in the same boat. The derogatory meaning in her words was self-evident. Mrs. Su didn't look at Ji Minggran again, but looked at Jinwan with great interest. It's good to do charity, but as Minggran said, your company is not short of money. Why do you need our investment? Jinwan glanced at the stack of documents in Mrs. Su's hand, which were all the documents Ji Minggran had taken out while chatting with her just now. The documents were full of all kinds of prospects for the future of the studio, and various ambitions written by talented subordinates, which made people feel that this studio might indeed have a good development, and was worth investing in. But Mrs. Su just skimmed through it casually, and was no longer interested in continuing to read it. Jinwan didn't take out any documents, but they happened to walk into a place in the mall that was contracted by several electronic products under the name of MN Group. Seeing that all the staff of MN Group were working very hard, and there were many customers in the electronic products and the stalls of major brands, it could be seen that everything under the name of MN Group was full of business opportunities. There was indeed no shortage of money or business to do. Seeing this scene, Mrs. Su had an idea in her heart, and then turned to look at Jinwan. Jinwan also turned to look at Mrs. Su. There was no desire in her eyes for this investment, but a polite smile. The more money, the better. Only with more investment can we achieve a win-win situation. I don't need to say more about MN Group's current strength. You can see it, and you know better than me where to invest your money. After all, as a professional investment businessman, you should have a long-term view. I won't influence your judgment, Mrs. Su. It's true that I don't need this money, but many domestic enterprises are not very stable now, and not everyone can achieve a win-win situation. But MN Group can certainly do it. Mrs. Su smiled and didn't speak anymore, and Jinwan didn't say more. They were both businessmen, and Mrs. Su certainly knew who could bring more profits to her. Unconvinced, Ji Minggran took Mrs. Su's hand and asked her if she was tired. She wanted to take Mrs. Su to the Western restaurant downstairs to sit for a while, but Mrs. Su refused. It was already noon. When they arrived at the food court in the mall, Jinwan saw a vegetarian restaurant and asked softly, how about a vegetarian restaurant? Mrs. Su nodded. Okay. Ji Minggran. After entering the restaurant and ordering a few simple dishes, Mrs. Su ignored Ji Minggran, but kept discussing with Jinwan the changes in the business in recent years, and some things about MN Group. Obviously, she was inclined to support MN Group. Ji Minggran wanted to speak several times, but couldn't get a word in, so she could only sit aside and stare at them. Before the dishes were served, Jinwan took the lemonade handed to her by the waiter and said with a smile, by the way, speaking of gifts, in fact, I also prepared 2 gifts for Mrs. Su. Oh, you also have gifts? Mrs. Su looked at Jinwan with a smile. Hearing that Jinwan also had gifts, Ji Minggran rolled her eyes. Just now, she looked at her with a contemptuous expression, and now she was trying to please Mrs. Su with gifts. Jinwan took out a few letters that looked old and dirty from her bag, and put them in front of Mrs. Su. In addition to donating to the construction of many Hope primary schools, MN Group also donates to some children from poor families every month. These are the thank you letters sent by those children not long ago. They were written by those children themselves. Their families are very poor, and they don't have good envelopes and stationery. The letters are also written in pencil, and the handwriting is a little blurred, but every word is full of gratitude and hope. I have treasured them since I received them. With that, Jinwan took out a string of ordinary-looking Buddha beads from her bag, and put it next to the envelope. This string of Buddha beads is made of very ordinary peach wood. I didn't hire a professional master to carve scriptures on it. Although it's a very ordinary and rough peach wood Buddha bead. This peach tree is a very old tree in the back mountain of Namfan Temple in Sea City. This peach wood is at least a few hundred years old, if not over 1,000 years old. Furthermore, it has always been under the influence of incense in the back mountain of Namfan Temple, so it's very spiritual. Not long ago, because the temple was renovated, some of the trees in the back mountain had to be dealt with. I asked for a few pieces of peach wood and polished them into Buddha beads. Seeing the 2 gifts that Jinwan took out, Ji Mengran suspected that she was joking. She gave these shabby things to Mrs. Su, who was worth tens of billions of yuan. Was she crazy? However, when Mrs. Su saw the 2 things that Jinwan took out, her eyes were shining. She raised her eyes, looked at Jinwan seriously and smiled. "CEOG, thank you. I'll accept these 2 gifts. I like them very much." Ji Mengran was stunned and looked incredulously at the happy smile on Mrs. Su's face. Jinwan calmly curved her lips into an elegant smile. "As long as you like it." Chapter 460. In the afternoon, Mrs. Su said goodbye to them with a smile, satisfied. Ji Mengran stood on the commercial street, watching as Jinwan turned around and glanced at her coldly. She felt a wave of bad luck in her heart, and was so angry that her face paled. Before Mrs. Su left, she didn't say a word to Ji Mengran. Instead, she had been holding Jinwan's hand and chatting with her. From what they talked about, it could be concluded that Mrs. Su was going to invest in MN Group. "Jinwan, where did you learn to charm people? How could Mrs. Su be attracted by you in just a few words?" Ji Mengran asked angrily. Jinwan walked to the side of the road and waited, saying coldly, "In fact, at first, Mrs. Su wanted to help you set up your studio. Can't you see that she had a good impression of you when you were a child? And MN Group is really not short of money, so she wanted to help you." Ji Mengran was stunned for a moment. Mrs. Su's attitude towards her at first was quite good, but later, "You can only blame yourself. You know how important this investment is to you, but you don't know how to do your homework. You don't even know what Mrs. Su likes to do in private," Jinwan said with a smile. Jinwan smiled. She used to invest with her husband, but her husband was killed in a major case that shocked the antique industry a few years ago. So Mrs. Su is particularly averse to antiques, calligraphy, and paintings. She has managed the investment company alone for many years. Think about it. Do you think she needs a watch like yours? It's meaningless for you to give her this kind of thing, which will only make people see you as a profiteer and make people unhappy. Besides, Jinwan glanced at Ji Mengran's clothes. "Although I know you are not short of money now, because you have Sheng Yihan to support you, you don't have to be so generous in front of Mrs. Su. What's the point of dressing so deliberately? She wants to help you because your studio is really in need of money now, but you show how rich you are everywhere. Her sympathy for you has been destroyed by you." Hearing this, Ji Mengran immediately stared at Jinwan, full of resentment. "Why are you so sure what Mrs. Su was thinking at that time?" Hearing this, Jinwan smiled and tilted her head, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Of course I don't know what she was thinking, but I've been in this industry for so long, and I know how to cater to people's preferences. Who doesn't know how to give gifts? Didn't you see I gave it to her? Just the 2 pieces of junk you gave her?" Ji Mengran snorted. "Junk?" Jinwan coldly glanced at her. "It's not up to you to decide whether it's a rags or not. If I say you haven't done your homework, then you haven't. Not only do you know nothing about Mrs. Su, but you don't even know her preferences. Don't you know that Mrs. Su has no children? She has always been very fond of children, so she often does charity and helps those who have difficulties. Charity is her favorite cause, and MN Group has indeed participated in the charity industry in recent years, just like her. We have a common language, and this is where you can't interrupt." Ji Mengran clenched her fists so hard that her fingers turned purple. She finally calmed herself down and didn't burst into curses on the street. Jinwan said, "Also, the most basic point is that Mrs. Su believes in Buddhism. She often worships Buddha at home, and there is a specially built temple in her home. It can be seen how persistent she is in believing in Buddhism. The things I gave her are not expensive. They add up to less than 50 yuan. Compared to your watch, which is worth more than 1,000,000 yuan, it's really a far cry. But I just spent 50 yuan to cater to her preferences. What, are you not convinced?" After speaking, Jinwan didn't look at Ji Mengran's incredulous expression. She opened the door of the taxi parked in front of her, got in and left. She waved her hand and left. Ji Mengran stiffened like a corpse. A few days later, MN Group received a new document from the government. After all, the real estate industry was now involved with many government agencies, and it had relations with various reconstruction and construction bureaus. When MN Group was abroad, it was still relatively free. But now that it had moved its headquarters back to China, and it had just returned to China, they had to fight wherever the government ordered them to. They had to reconstruct wherever they were told to, and they had to participate in any project they were told to participate in. Jin Wan looked at the newly issued document and fell into deep thought. There was no need to mention Shine Group's status in the United States and High City. Although MN Group was doing well now, it was still far from Shine Group. But the government actually wanted MN Group and Shine Group to jointly renovate High City Stadium and build it into the largest stadium in all the provinces and cities in China. The leader's intention was very clear. They couldn't control Shine Group, and neither could MN Group. If they wanted to stabilize the relationship between these two companies and the government for a certain period of time, they had to find a way to keep the two companies in check and balance each other. This was an opportunity to keep them in check and balance each other. But the people at the top didn't know that even if Shine Group had reached the point where no one could control it, Jin Wan didn't want to suppress them, let alone have any chance to keep Shine Group in check and balance each other. She just wanted to keep her own company. But the leaders of the government didn't think so. They certainly didn't want anyone to be too superior to others. Especially the Mo family and the Shine Group, which could shake the coastal cities nearby with a stomp of their feet. The higher-ups had all kinds of concerns, so they still wanted to suppress them secretly, but they dared not do it too obviously. Therefore, they wanted to target the MN Group, which could be considered as using the MN Group as a weapon. Jin Wan knew the purpose of the leaders, but if she wanted to keep MN Group in High City, she couldn't refuse this matter. Xia Tian had returned home to prepare for delivery these days, and didn't come to the company. Xiaoba stood in the office and saw Jin Wan was silent after receiving the document. Xiaoba carefully leaned over, wanting to know what she was going to do now. But Jin Wan looked as usual. He couldn't tell if she was angry or something, but from the way she threw the document on the desk, he could tell that she was in a bad mood now. She didn't mind being used by the government. Anyway, the other party was Shine Group, and wouldn't do anything to MN Group. But the other party was Shine Group, which was a big problem for Jin Wan. Chapter 461. Xiaoba thought to herself, the government is forcing Jin Wan, the little sheep, into the cage of Mo Jingshan, the big bad wolf. Boss hadn't flown into a rage since she saw the document, which showed that she was really strong-willed now. Boss, about the matter with Shine Group, what are you going to do? Jin Wan calmly picked up the document again, glanced at it, then put it down, turned over the other documents on the table, and said flatly, I've spent so much effort to move the headquarters back to China. Now even if I want to run away, it's not easy. Since the higher-ups have made such a decision, I can't refuse. The document has been issued. What else can I do except to agree? That's true. Xiaoba liked to see Jin Wan so calm and confident. Then boss, do you have a plan in mind now? Jin Wan picked up the pen and signed the documents but didn't speak. It had been almost half a month since she was blocked in the corridor by Mo Jingshan because of the power failure in the apartment. During this half a month, she had been busy with the company's affairs and hadn't heard any news about Mo Jingshan. Of course, she didn't ask about him. She just pretended that what happened that day didn't happen. She thought she could stop mentioning it and thinking about it. But now she suddenly had to cooperate with Shine Group. And this project was a big one that couldn't be completed in a year or two. Not to mention she had to go to the province and the city for meetings. If Shine Group didn't refuse this cooperation, Mo Jingshan would definitely show up in person, arrange the project, and make a few proposals. I'll talk to the planning department of Shine and find time to go to the city for a meeting to decide on the topic of the proposal. With that, Jin Wan buried herself in work and didn't want to continue talking about this matter. 2 days later, The proposals of the two companies were completed and sent to the government for approval and selection by the staff of each company. After finalizing the reconstruction plan, they contacted the two companies and set a time to go to the province for a meeting. After arriving at the meeting place set by the government, Jinwon got out of the car, walked in, and was guided to the conference room by the staff inside. As soon as she walked in, she saw that the leaders of the province and the staff of the construction bureau were almost all present. They were sitting on the sofas around the luxurious conference room, drinking tea and talking. At the same time, she suddenly saw the man sitting on the leather sofa to her right. Mo Jingshan sat there quietly. Today he was not dressed in black, but in a moon-white casual shirt. His figure was tall and slender as usual, and his facial features were as handsome as the work of God. His ink-black eyes were cold and unapproachable. Sitting there, he was elegant, cold, and noble. His aura was indifferent and low-key, but it was also eye-catching. Mo Jingshan looked at Mo Jingshan. The memory of being blocked by him in the corridor flashed before her eyes. Her lips still felt numb, and she could still remember how hard he had kissed her that day. As soon as Jinwon glanced in that direction, she saw that Mo Jingshan was not looking at her, but was talking to a well-dressed man next to him. The two of them seemed to be chatting happily. After Jinwon entered the door, he slowly turned his face. There was still a hint of a smile on his lips, but the emotions in his black eyes were cold and bottomless. Perhaps it was because there were many leaders and managers present who did not know much about their relationship in the past. Or perhaps it was necessary to be courteous in such an environment. The man smiled at him. However, the smile was very faint, and his eyes emitted a cold luster, as well as two stars hidden in the night sky. Xiaoba followed behind Jinwon and secretly glanced in Mo Jingshan's direction. From the perspective of a bystander, she found that her previous guess was right. CEO Mo's eyes were clearly. The little sheep had finally been sent to the big bad wolf's mouth. Xiaoba grumbled in her heart, and was excited because it was rare to see Mo Jingshan at such a close distance. She remembered the first time she saw CEO Mo in real life, through a computer video. At that time, CEO Mo had fed them a mouthful of dog food. At that time boss and CEO Mo were so close. He could even heat a glass of milk for boss at night, and gently help her deal with the files on the computer. But now Xiaoba looked at Jinwon's back with a sigh. Jinwon had withdrawn her gaze and restrained her emotions. She expressionlessly walked to the leaders to say hello, and then sat down on the sofa a little further away from Mo Jingshan. The scene of the talented people of the two worlds sitting together to talk was like a fight between masters. Both sides were inferior. The final result was that the plan of the MN Group's planning department was approved. Jinwon was a little surprised by this result. After all, several other participating agencies or companies had also submitted their plans. Although the level of their plans was very ordinary, she knew the level of the planning department of the Shine Group. But when she saw the plans of the Shine Group, she knew how perfunctory they were this time. It was clear that the plans were made by interns who had just joined the company and were not familiar with the relevant business. In other words, Jinwon won without doing anything. Although she did have the ability, she did win without doing anything. Based on her understanding of the Shine Group, it was not difficult to see that the Shine Group was giving in to the MN Group. Why did they give in to her? When it was announced that the MN Group's plan was approved, Jinwon took a thoughtful look at Mo Jingshan. During the break of the meeting, Jinwon got up and went out to make a phone call. When she came back from the phone call, she was about to go to the bathroom when she heard two government secretaries chatting inside. CEO Mo is so handsome. President Mo is so handsome. I heard that when he was still the president of the Mo Corporation in High City, he was already famous for his good looks. But later, the media didn't dare to publish the Mo family's affairs and President Mo's photos. Today is the first time I've seen President Mo in person. I really didn't expect that there could be such a good-looking man in the upper class. Look at the other leaders in the meeting just now. They are all either bald or have beer bellies, or they are all glowing like big leaders who eat and drink well all day. But President Mo is so calm. I don't know how old President Mo is. Chapter 462. AI. The more I talk, the more excited I get. I really don't know what kind of woman can subdue a man like CEO Mo. He's so handsome. I wonder if he's married yet. My home is in High City, but I was still in school a few years ago. I don't remember where I heard it from, but I heard that CEO Mo is married. That's impossible. With CEO Mo's looks, not to mention in this big high city, even in the entire country, no woman can match up to him. How could he get married so early? I also don't remember when I heard it. I think it was before he took over the Shine Group. At that time, he got married in High City. Which of the 4 prominent families in High City was it? I can't remember, and I don't have a deep impression of it. He's really married before? Oh my God. What kind of woman can be fancied by a male god like CEO Mo? She must have burned incense in her previous life. Outside the bathroom, Jean Wan, who might have really burned incense in her previous life, raised her hand and touched her nose, which was about to sneeze. But I haven't heard any news about his wife recently. Maybe they're divorced. I heard that marriages in rich families aren't very stable. But CEO Mo is really handsome. Just now, when I went over to pour President Mo a cup of tea, he glanced at me and even smiled at me. I felt like my soul was about to be hooked away. How is that possible? I was watching when you went over. CEO Mo clearly didn't smile. He smiled. He smiled at me. Dream on. CEO Mo is such a serious person. He didn't even smile at the provincial leaders. Do you expect him to smile at you? Is there a flower blooming on your face? How could he smile at you? Pfft, he's obviously smiling. Forget it if you don't believe me. But to be honest, there aren't many people in the Chinese circle who can compete with Shine Group. Those who are close to President Mo, not to mention getting married. Even if they're good friends, they'll probably have a smooth life. After all, it's good to have a big tree to lean on. No one can topple a big tree like President Mo. That's true. No matter what, Shine Group is still the leader among the Chinese enterprises. What's more, the Mo family is still in High City. I really hope President Mo can stay in High City and not return to America. Previously, the government had applied for a partnership with Shine Group several times, but they were all rejected. Who would have thought that this time, they would actually agree to build a stadium with MN Group? All the projects that the government had approached them for in the past were obviously better than this. But this time, they actually agreed to cooperate with the government, and even MN Group got involved. Yeah, this is the first time I've seen CEO Mo attend a meeting at the government office. I'm so happy to see him in person. Jean Wan was about to go in when she passed by the restroom. When she heard these conversations, she thought about it and turned to the restroom on the other floor. When she came back, she went straight into the conference room and continued the meeting. In the evening, the government invited them to a nearby hotel for dinner. They prepared a luxurious private room and 2 large tables of sumptuous food and wine. Jean Wan first went to eat with them, and then because a client of the company was nearby, she took advantage of the fact that the leaders were exchanging pleasantries to sneak out of the hotel. She went to sit with the client and had a simple meal. She didn't meet the client for long. She just chatted briefly. 2 hours later, she asked Xiao Ba, who had been accompanying her, to get off work and go home. Then she hurried back to the hotel. The atmosphere in the private room was lively. After 3 rounds of wine, a leader was already singing happily. Jean Wan looked around and didn't see any seats, so she didn't go in and just chatted with the sober people in front of the door. After chatting for a while, she found that there seemed to be a few people missing in the private room. After asking, she learned that some of them had gone next door to play cards. Mo Jingshan wasn't here. Did he also go next door to play cards? However, after a while the people next door who were playing cards came back. It was Shen Mu who pushed the door open and came in. Shen Mu hurriedly called the others over to continue playing cards, shouting something like 3 missing 1. When he came to Jean Wan, Shen Mu asked with a smile, CEO Ji, do you want to play cards with us? It's just mahjong. You should know how to play. Let's forget about mahjong. I don't know how to play it. Were you playing cards with them next door? Jinwan asked. Shenmu nodded and greeted a leader, who came over with a smile. He then looked at Jinwan. You want to ask where CEO Mo is, don't you? No. However, the private room was noisy. Shenmu didn't seem to hear Jinwan's words. He lowered his head and leaned close to her to whisper. Recently, CEO Mo has been working overtime in the company and often stays up late. Earlier, he only drank a few glasses of wine and went next door to rest. But in the past 2 to 3 years, CEO Mo often suffers from insomnia. I think it won't be too quiet here. CEO G, if you don't have anything else to do, help me buy some sleeping and calming medicine from the nearby pharmacy and send it to CEO Mo with that. Shenmu stuffed a room card into Jinwan's hand. Without looking at her expression, he smiled and called the other leaders who were about to play cards with him. Jinwan wanted to say that there was no need to ask her for help with such a matter, but Shenmu was a little tipsy and was excitedly calling the leaders to play cards with him. Clearly, he felt that the only person he could trust to enter Mo Jingshan's room was Jinwan. So he didn't think twice and directly handed the room card to her. And he actually asked her to buy sleeping and calming medicine for Mo Jingshan. Not only did Shenmu call for people to fill up the empty seats, but he also successfully gathered a second table of people to play cards. Just as he was about to leave the private room, he seemed to remember Jinwan. He turned back to see that Jinwan was still sitting in her original position and had no intention of helping him. He hurriedly clasped his hands together and bowed to Jinwan, whispering, Ancestor, please do me a favor. I'm busy serving the leaders and playing cards. I really can't leave. Please do me a favor. Then, Shenmu gave her an earnest and pleading smile before turning around and following the high-spirited leaders to the mahjong room next door. Jinwan looked at Shenmu's drunken back view with disdain. She then glanced at the golden room card in her hand. The author's words. Today there were 80,000 words. The female lead's career, growth, emotions, and emotional changes were all necessary. Some of the plots had to be written in the future, even if she didn't want to write them now. Sooner or later, they would take up this space, so she might as well write them all at the same time. That way, when she focused on writing the plot of the male and female leads, there wouldn't be these troublesome people appearing. In the future, there would be more and more scenes between the male and female leads. Some suspicious points and foreshadowing had already begun to surface. Chapter 463. CEO G, aren't you going to play cards? Someone by the side asked. Jinwan smiled and shook her head. She chatted with a neatly dressed old CEO for a while. The old CEO noticed the item in her hand and asked her what was with this room card. She casually placed the room card on the table. It's nothing. A friend left it here for me to keep temporarily. Shenmu had already left for 20 minutes, but Jinwan still had no intention of getting up. 20 minutes later, Shenmu called. Jinwan glanced at the caller ID, picked up her bag and the room card on the table, and turned to leave. When she reached the door and picked up the call, Shenmu's voice could be heard. It was very noisy. As expected, he was really playing cards. There were people constantly urging him to play cards. CEO G, have you been there? Shenmu took some time out of his busy schedule to ask. No, the room card is still with me. I'll hand it to the housekeeping staff before I leave. You can go get it then. The other end of the line was silent for a moment. Suddenly, she heard the people playing cards on the other end clamoring. Aya Xiaoshen, why did you suddenly stand up? Are you not playing anymore? Continue, it's not over yet. You can't just leave after winning for so long. Hurry up and continue. Then I won't trouble CEO G. I'll go to the pharmacy myself. Shenmu did not say much. It sounded like he was preparing to leave the room. However, the leaders around him kept pestering him to not let him leave. It was indeed not good for someone who had just won for so long to leave just like that. It had already caused many people's dissatisfaction. Jinwan heard the commotion on the other end, and that Shenmu seemed to have really stood up to open the door. She turned to look at the door of the room next door. After a moment of silence, she said, "Forget it. Continue playing cards. You can't afford to offend those leaders at the table. After speaking, she did not wait for Shenmu to speak and hung up. Jinwan walked out of the hotel and searched for a long time before finding a pharmacy. She went in to buy some calming medicine, but the person in the pharmacy said that it was best not to take too much of it. He recommended some calming medicine and incense to help her sleep. Nowadays, some people pursued fashion and often put some essential oils and incense in their rooms. The hotel next to it was a 6-star hotel, after all, and there were often elegant CEOs staying there. Therefore, it was possible to have a modern incense burner. As for the calming medicinal soup, it was better to boil it and heat it up. Not to mention that it was already very late. The rooms next to the private room were only for temporary rest. They weren't suites with their own kitchens, so it wasn't easy to prepare things like medicinal soup. Jinwan made her choice. For a moment, she was unsure of how serious Shenmu's claim that Mo Jingxian had been suffering from insomnia for the past few years was. Medicine that entered his mouth could not be taken casually. In the end, she bought a bag of incense to help him sleep. She was worried that there was nothing in the room that could hold incense, so she specifically went to the housekeeping department to ask the staff for a small silver incense burner. Sure enough, there were too many elegant people nowadays. The hotel actually had a spare, and this small incense burner was quite exquisite. She went to Mo Jingxian's room and knocked on the door. Seeing that there was no movement, she guessed that Mo Jingxian had fallen asleep. She used the room card to open the door. She pushed open the door and entered, only to discover that Mo Jingxian was not asleep as she had expected. The man was sitting on one side of the sofa, rubbing his forehead with one hand. He seemed to have a headache from not being able to fall asleep. When he heard the sound of the door, he raised his eyes indifferently. A few buttons on his white shirt were unbuttoned, and his handsome features were indifferent. He lifted his eyelids slightly and glanced at her coldly. He clearly did not expect the person to be Jinwan. When he heard the knock, he thought it was Shenmu. Knowing that the other party had a room card, he could not be bothered with him. In the end, the moment he raised his eyes, he saw Jinwan walking in with a small bag. The moment their eyes met, Jinwan calmly shifted her gaze away. Her expression was indifferent as she brought in the incense burner and the things she bought from the pharmacy. Shenmu asked me to buy some things to help you sleep. I didn't buy any medicine. I only bought some incense. Try it and see if you can sleep well. Jinwan did not look at him. As she spoke, she nimbly placed the items on the coffee table and quickly placed the incense block into the small incense burner. She found several long matches from the box of the incense block and lit them. She gently shook the matches in her hands before placing everything on the coffee table. After doing all this, she did not look at Mo Jingxian's eyes. She took 2 steps back and did not raise her eyes. CEO Mo, rest well. I won't disturb you any longer. Jinwan. The man called her name. His cold and low voice was especially clear in the quiet room. Jinwan did not turn back and walked to the door. However, before she could open the door, the man had already arrived. His long arm reached out to stop her from opening the door. He slammed the door shut. She paused and turned to look at the man. It seemed like he was really resting in the room next door, because he was not feeling well today. The man's short, black hair drooped slightly as he lowered his head to look at her, casting a faint shadow on his face. The bright light in the room shone a trace of warmth on his face. His deep, black eyes lost their usual coldness and majesty. His gaze seemed to have transformed into a ray of light as he looked at her. Even though he did not lean too close, the movement of his arm against the door almost trapped Jinwan between them. Jinwan leaned slightly to the side against the door and turned to meet the man's pitch-black, deep gaze. CEO Mo, you didn't drink today, right? I don't think you need me to remind you about propriety. What is propriety? The man seemed to be smiling. He lowered his eyes to look at her clear and cold eyes. After returning to China, you didn't even say hello to me when we met again. Is this your propriety? Jinwan relaxed her brows and said calmly, although MN Group is doing well now, it first established itself in England and has just returned to High City. In front of the big shots in this city, I'm still a newborn calf. They can easily crush me like a grasshopper at any time. If I don't act properly, if I don't know how to behave properly, I'm afraid I'll die without a burial place as soon as I return to China. CEO Mo, my propriety to you is no different from that to others. Mo Jingshan turned her face and pinched her chin with one hand. He did not use much force, and his thin lips moved slightly. Didn't you say you didn't plan to come back after going to England? Why did you come back? N. Chapter 464. So, if Xia Tian can continue to help you in High City, are you really going to leave and never come back? The man lowered his eyes and looked at her with clear eyes. It didn't seem like he was interrogating her, but his ambiguous posture and oppression all showed the difference in height and physique between a man and a woman. Even if he was not feeling well today, as long as he didn't intend to let her go, she couldn't get out of this door. Jinwan suddenly smiled and turned to look at Mo Jingshan with a smile. She suddenly turned around and leaned against the door. As if tempting him with her red lips, she gently exhaled. She kissed him softly and warmly, with her unique fragrance and elegant and charming light perfume blowing against his ear. As the man stared at her with dark eyes, she smiled and said, "Not only will I never come back, but we don't even need to meet again in this life, do we?" As she spoke, she raised her hand and gently hooked the collar of the man's shirt. She looked at him seductively and coldly, and said lightly with a smile, but the smile was not real. "On the day I signed the divorce papers, I said on the phone, Mo Jingshan, I won't come back." She gently pointed her finger at his heart, slightly raised the corners of her eyes, and with a faint smile, she said clearly, "I won't come back." When she said that she would never return, she did not refer to the Imperial Garden, nor did she refer to this city, but where she was pointing with her hand now, he held her hand that stopped in front of his chest and pushed her directly against the door. He firmly pressed her body wrapped in the summer dress and said in a low voice, "COG is really getting what she wants now. When she wants to be ruthless, even men are ashamed of their inferiority. When we meet again, we will be strangers. You can be heartless." Jinwan raised her eyebrows. There was no grievance or helplessness in her voice. She questioned him directly. "Speaking of heartless, CEO Mo, I'm afraid you've forgotten that you said you were dead. I'm afraid no one in this world can compare to you in heartlessness. How dare I argue with you? But then again, even if I'm really heartless, CEO Mo, what right do you have to control me?" Mo Jingshan closed his eyes and frowned for a moment. Jinwan didn't miss his expression, but she still looked at him sharply and didn't give in at all, until the man suddenly withdrew his hand from the door behind her and said indifferently, "All right, you can go." Jinwan stood by the door and didn't move, but she could see that he really didn't seem to be feeling well. She didn't have the good intention to go over and care for him, so she took out her cell phone from her bag and scrolled through her contacts. "Is Qin Sighting still in High City? If you're not feeling well, I'll call him over. Or any other doctor you trust will do." Before she finished speaking, the man who was about to leave suddenly turned back. Before Jinwan could react, he grabbed her wrist, causing her to lose the strength in her hand. Her cell phone fell on the carpet by the door, and then he pulled her into his arms with his long arm and bent over her without saying a word. Jinwan's brain went blank. The moment she was brought into the man's arms by his strong arm, she hurriedly stepped back and tried to push him away with her hands and feet, but she was afraid that her high-heeled shoes would step on the phone, so she could only stagger into his arms. Her brain was almost broken by this deep and heavy kiss, and she could only feel the heat in his breath. This time, he didn't linger on her lips for a long time like that night when he blocked her in the corridor, but deeply tasted her tongue, not letting go of any inch of her mouth. "Yu, Mo Jing Yu. No, Yu." Jinwan punched and kicked him fiercely, but he still turned around and brought her to the sofa not far behind him. When he pressed her into the sofa, she bit him hard, and the man paused in pain because of the force of her bite. Just like that, Jinwan raised her hand and pushed him half an arm's length away. Her eyes were cold, and she scolded through gritted teeth, "Mo Jingshan, The flowers at home are not as fragrant as the wild flowers outside, right? When your wife was with you, you tried your best to push me away. Now that you're divorced, things have changed. Now you're shameless. However, the man just sneered, and the darkness in his eyes did not fade. He pinched her chin and kissed her again, stopping her breath. It was obvious that he was determined to solidify the infamy of being shameless. They struggled like a fight, but the difference in strength between the man and the woman was too great, and the winner was decided. Jean Wan panted and turned her head to avoid him. Rape within marriage is illegal, much less rape after divorce. Mo Jingshan, don't go too far. The woman's usually delicate and soft appearance was now filled with an unfamiliar ruthlessness. Her bright, watery eyes were filled with heartlessness and coldness. Mo Jingshan no longer kissed her, but after pressing her into the sofa, he did not intend to let her get up. His long arm pulled her into his embrace, ignoring Jean Wan's struggle. He pressed against her and held her. When Jean Wan was about to scold him, he buried his breath in her neck, speaking softly and huskily, "Don't move. Mo Jingshan." The man leaned against her body and did not speak. The room was extremely quiet. Aside from their breathing, there was only the barely discernible smoke from the small incense burner on the coffee table. The sleeping incense had the fragrance of Chinese medicine and a faint lavender fragrance. Mo Jingshan's breath slowly calmed down. He didn't get up immediately but held her. Holding her, he stroked her palm, separated her fingers little by little, and clenched them tightly. Then he said slowly and meaningfully, "All the difficult paths have been taken, and all the things that should be ended have been ended. You are no longer the Jean Wan you used to be." It was unclear whether Jean Wan understood or not. She paused for a moment and then sneered. "Of course I'm no longer the Jean Wan of the past." Mo Jingshan did not speak. He did not even bring the topic back to the previous sentence. "Mo Jingshan, can you not press against me? There's no relationship between us. You're simply, don't move." His tone was flat as he cut her off. Jean Wan closed her eyes. She was slightly impatient, but the experience from 3 years ago had taught her to control all her dissatisfaction. She suppressed her anger and did not speak. She did not resist, and only waited for him to let go of her. However, what she did not expect was that after Mo Jingshan stopped speaking, his tall and broad body pressed against hers. His body was initially tense due to discomfort, but at this moment he relaxed slightly. Chapter 465. Mo Jingshan actually fell asleep on her just like that? Faced with this unexpected predicament, Jean Wan subconsciously wanted to push the man on top of her away. But as soon as her hand touched the man's hair, she suddenly remembered his slightly frowning expression and Shen Mu's words that he had been suffering from insomnia for years and hadn't had a good sleep for a long time. Should her heart soften? She didn't even think about it. In her heart, she directly refused. She shouldn't. However, Jean Wan was silent for a moment. Feeling the man's steady breath on her neck, she could only keep lying on the sofa and look at the bright crystal lights in the room. Forget it. Just let him sleep for 5 minutes. After all, she had just returned to High City, and MN Group's foundation in High City was not stable yet. Right now, their relationship was no longer that of a divorced husband and wife. They no longer loved each other. There were many things that didn't need to be said. However, it was precisely because she planned to treat him as the sky of High City from now on that they would be strangers if they ever met again. After all, if she really offended him and angered him, she probably wouldn't have any good days in High City in the future. For the sake of Mo Jingshan's status, she wouldn't offend him. She would give him 5 minutes to sleep. Only 5 minutes. She slowly let go of the man's hair, and then awkwardly and laboriously retracted her hands to her sides. Although Mo Jingshan was on top of her, making it impossible for her to leave, he did not do anything except kiss her domineeringly. Even after he fell asleep, he was still very well behaved, holding her waist with one hand. Jean Wan's cell phone fell to the ground by the door, and she had nothing in her hand. Every second felt like a year. In the first minute, she was still thinking that when she left the room, she must not be seen by other leaders or bosses. Otherwise, in the business world, all kinds of romantic things were common. If they saw it, she didn't know what they would think of her. Before the divorce, her entire life revolved around Emo Jingshan. If it could be said that even her studio and other aspects of her life were all because of Emo Jingshan, then after the divorce, it was as though she had completely separated herself from Emo Jingshan. She had a teacher and a friend in England. She had a noble and a friend. In the past 3 years, she had walked step by step on her own. She did not rely on Emo Jingshan at all. So of course, she didn't want others to see her and suspect that she had slept with Emo Jingshan, or that she had slept with some important people along the way to get up. No one liked to be judged by others in such a way that all their hard work would be erased. Furthermore, after the divorce, just as Emo Jingshan said, her life would return to its original trajectory. It didn't matter what the starting point was, but the divorce was indeed an important point in her life. The next minute she was still thinking about these things. 3 to 4 minutes later, the small incense burner on the coffee table still emitted light smoke. However, Jean Wan's eyelids gradually found it difficult to keep open. She slowly blinked several times, reminding herself not to fall asleep just like that. However, in less than 5 minutes, her eyelids were completely unable to keep open, and her breathing gradually evened out. The night passed quickly. The sound of running water could be heard from the bathroom. All of a sudden, there was a knock on the door. It was a little urgent and careful. Xiaoba knocked on the door for about 2 minutes before the door was abruptly opened. The curtains in the room were open, and light shone in from behind. The man's upper body was almost naked. His handsome and perfect figure was smooth, and his lower body was wrapped in a white bath towel. He held a bathrobe that he had grabbed at the last minute. His ink-black hair was as black as ink from being wet, but the main point was that his face was excessively handsome. Because he saw that the person standing outside the door was a girl, Emo Jingshan put the bathrobe on. As he tied the belt, he coldly asked, "Looking for Jean Wan?" Xiaoba was already scared silly by the door. Earlier on, she had already instinctively raised her hands to cover her face and eyes. However, she still couldn't help but blush. She carefully parted her fingers. Seeing that Boss Missouri had already put on the bathrobe, she finally put her hands down. She looked inside and saw that Jean Wan's bag and cell phone were on the ground. Jean Wan's sunscreen jacket was also on the sofa. Even the hairband that Jean Wan usually used was scattered on the sofa. Xiaoba forcefully swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Without even thinking, she could guess what had happened last night. This was Emo Jingshan. If Boss had really slept with Boss Missouri, no one would dare to say a word. After all, they were husband and wife in the past. But last night, Jean Wan clearly did not show any signs of contacting Emo Jingshan. Why did she become like this early in the morning? Emo CEO Emo, our CEO G, she's really here? Xiaoba's face was red as she stuttered, but she did not dare to look at Emo Jingshan's face. I called her, but she didn't pick up, so I came to look for her. Earlier on, I bumped into Assistant Shun. He seemed to have been playing cards all night and didn't sleep. He said that if CEO G didn't go back, she might be in this room. I didn't expect CEO Mo to be here. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to disturb you. I'm only here to look for CEO G. Emo Jingshan unhurriedly tied the belt on his bathrobe. He glanced at the direction of the bedroom. She's still sleeping. Hearing these words, it was as though something had really happened between him and Jean Wan last night. If he was not Emo Jingshan, Xiaoba would have already rushed in with her bag and yelled pervert to save Jean Wan. However, the other party was Emo Jingshan. Furthermore, at such a close distance, he was unbelievably handsome. She made a no sound and took a step back with a red face. She softly said, "Then when CEO G wakes up, please have her give me a call. I'll wait for her in the hotel lobby." Emo Jingshan's expression was cold, and he did not speak. Xiaoba continued to take a step back. With a pung sound, the door in front of her was slammed shut. Xiaoba leaned against the wall outside the door. Her heart was beating like a drum. This time, not only was she able to see President Mo through a computer video, nor was she able to see President Mo from a few meters away. She had even accidentally seen the legendary Boss Mo's bathing scene from less than a meter away. So handsome. Boss had actually slept with CEO Mo again? Did that mean that in the future, they could do whatever they wanted in Haicheng? When Jinwan opened her eyes, she was slightly dazed. What was going on? Why did she really fall asleep? She glanced out the window. The sky was already bright. She abruptly realized that she was actually lying on the bed. She immediately sat up, yanking the blanket aside to look at the clothes on her body. Aside from the sunscreen jacket, she was still wearing everything else. Chapter 466. More importantly, how did she end up on the bed after falling asleep? Jinwan rubbed her messy hair and got off the bed. When she walked out of the living room, the first thing she saw was Mo Jingshan, who had already changed his clothes. She paused for a moment. She saw that the man had most likely just showered and had a good night's sleep. He seemed to be in a good state of mind. She subconsciously glanced down at her own clothes and confirmed that nothing had happened last night. It was likely that he had carried her onto the bed after falling asleep. She recalled that when she was in Aolan International before the divorce, she had fallen asleep on the sofa because of a stomachache. That night, Mo Jingshan must have carried her to the bedroom to sleep. After all, he was the only one in the world who could make her defenseless when she fell asleep and be carried to the bed unconsciously. Jinwan glanced at the small incense burner on the coffee table. She could roughly guess why she had fallen asleep within a few minutes last night. This was truly an unexpected situation. She did not speak. She had already said everything she needed to say last night. She walked over to pick up her coat from the sofa and put it on. She saw that Mo Jingshan had already placed her phone and bag on the cabinet by the door. She walked over to pick up her bag and opened the door without saying a word. The moment she opened the door, she turned to look at the man who had no intention of stopping her. The morning sun landed on his body. The moon-white shirt from yesterday had disappeared and was replaced by a deep black. She looked at him. CEO Mo, you and I are both people with status. You know what you should and shouldn't do. It's already been more than 3 years. Let's just treat it as if nothing happened, okay? Mo Jingshan calmly looked at her. He did not agree or reject her. He only said, "Aren't you going to wash up before leaving?" "No need. I'll go back and wash up." Finishing her words, she opened the door and turned to leave. The sound of her high heels grew softer and softer. In the end, it was replaced by the sound of the elevator. It was the sound of her leaving. The room returned to silence. Mo Jingshan watched as the door closed once more. He turned to look outside. The sun was warm, and the blue sky stretched as far as the eye could see. It was as though Jinwan's new life had been reborn, filled with confidence and vitality. From the corner of his eye, he suddenly caught sight of a woman's hair tie on the sofa. He walked over. He picked it up. After Jinwan left the room, in order not to be seen by others, she did not look for Shinmu. When she went downstairs, she suddenly saw Xiaoba waiting in the hall. Xiaoba hurried over and asked with a smile, "Boss, you're awake. How did you sleep last night?" Jinwan immediately squinted at her. "When did you come?" "I arrived half an hour ago." Special Assistant Shun said you were in CEO Mo's room. When I went to knock on the door, CEO Mo said you were still sleeping. I guess you were exhausted last night. Xiaoba's eyes lit up as she giggled. Jinwan's footsteps paused in an instant. She forced herself to stand firm on the spot, and then turned to Xiaoba with a jerk. "Last night wasn't what you think." "Oh, reuniting after a long separation and rekindling old love. I've never experienced this before. It's definitely different from my naive imagination." I understand. Little Mina continued to grin. "Jinwan." She didn't explain any further and walked straight out. She originally planned to drive, but Xiaoba eagerly invited her to sit in the back. Jinwan did not reject, and only said that she wanted to go back to take a shower. Xiaoba directly drove her back. On the way back, the car was very quiet. Xiaoba saw that Jinwan's expression was especially stern, and did not dare to ask any more nosy questions. She only drove quietly. Jinwan sat in the back seat. After thinking for a long time, she picked up her phone and looked for Qin Sighting's number. It had been more than 3 years since they last contacted each other. She did not know if Qin Sighting was still in High City, nor did she know if he had changed his number. Back then, Jin Wan had cleared all of Qin Sighting's contact information, but she still kept Qin Sighting's number. After all, Qin Sighting had helped her with many things. She hesitated for a moment. Although she should have made up her mind, she couldn't be an ungrateful person. Not long after, the call was picked up. Qin Sighting's clear and magnetic voice was the same as before. Hello. Hello. Jin Wan had forgotten that she was using a different number from 3 years ago. She directly asked, Dr. Qin, it's been many years since we last met. Are you still in High City? The other side of the phone was silent for a long time. There seemed to be a pause. After a moment, Qin Sighting finally asked, Jin Wan? Yes, it's me. Jin Wan's voice was calm. After returning to the country, I haven't been able to meet Dr. Qin. In the end, I still have to call to trouble you. I'm really ashamed. I heard that you've returned. Why are you being so polite with me? Jin Wan did not continue the small talk, and directly said, I heard from Shenmu that Mo Jingshan has been suffering from insomnia for the past few years. What's going on? Qin Sighting clearly did not expect Jin Wan to mention Mo Jingshan. He was silent for a moment, and did not ask further. He only answered, for the past 3 years, he has indeed had this illness, but it's not as serious as Shenmu said. It's true that he often has trouble sleeping at night, but this can't be considered a long-term illness. More importantly, he often works overtime and stays up late. There are all kinds of people in the country's business world, and the atmosphere of the upper class is inseparable from alcohol. It's inevitable that he will drink some alcohol. After enduring day after day, his body will definitely feel uncomfortable. Generally speaking, it's because he doesn't sleep well. Coupled with tiredness and excessive socializing, he will occasionally have a headache. However, after a good night's sleep, he'll be fine. It's because of the lack of rest. That's right. Ever since your divorce. Qin Sighting paused. Ever since 3 years ago, he has been constantly working hard. He rarely listens to others' advice and goes home early to rest. He's just taking advantage of his youth. If it were someone in his 40s or 50s, he would have died long ago. All right, I understand. Thank you, Dr. Qin. Why are you suddenly asking about him? Is there something going on between the two of you? No, don't misunderstand. I just met him last night and heard about this from Shenmu. After returning to the country, I haven't had the chance to greet Dr. Qin. I thought of giving you a call and asked in passing. Qin Sighting smiled and did not ask further. All right, we'll meet again when we have time. But right now you're a busy person. I'm afraid I won't be as busy as you. Dr. Qin, you're being too polite. You hold a scalpel to save people, while I'm in the business world. I've only learned how to be treacherous and become an unscrupulous businessman. How would I dare to compare myself to Dr. Qin? Not bad. It's been a few years since we last met, and you've become so polite. Chapter 467. Boss, something happened. In MN Group's office, Jin Wan had just returned from meeting a business partner. Before she could sit down, she heard Xiaoba run in, rushing over with a newspaper in her hand. What are you doing? How old are you? You should have gained some experience after staying in England for the past few years. Why are you still so impatient? Jin Wan glanced at her unhappily. Aya, something really happened. Xiaoba slammed the newspaper on the office table. Look, when you went to the meeting and dinner with the leaders in the city last time, didn't the CEO Zhang of Ming High Company take advantage of you at the dinner table? I don't know who took this photo of him touching your hand and sold it to the media. Right now, the financial news is almost taken over by gossip. They're all saying that you slept all the way up. A bunch of people in the industry are gossiping about you. I think it won't be long before the news of your marriage with Mo will be revealed again. Jin Wan finally took the newspaper. This photo was clearly taken from an angle. CEO Zhang was indeed sitting next to me, but he asked me to pass him a toothpick. The toothpick was so small and it was hard to see it clearly. It looks like I took the initiative to hold his hand. It's just a matter of the angle, Jinwan said without changing her expression. Of course I know it's a matter of the angle. I also know that you've rejected so many men. Although you usually do what you should, you've never been taken advantage of by anyone. This photo clearly shows that some companies are jealous of our MN group and are deliberately targeting you. But I heard that CEO Zhang's wife is famous for being a tough woman in High City. Because her family used to be in the loan business, she's especially domineering. Right now, we can use some money to suppress the media and stop them from spreading such nonsense. But CEO Zhang's wife is not easy to deal with. Earlier, I heard from the security guard that a group of people ran to our company and splashed 2 buckets of dog blood. They stood outside and called you a vixen. Really? So lively? Different from Xiaoba's anxious and worried expression, Jinwan curved the corner of her lips, turned to the window, and looked downstairs. I can't see them now. The security guard has already sent them away. But I'm afraid that those people who came to make trouble must have been photographed by some busybody. I've already spoken to the media, but I'm afraid that CEO Zhang's wife will continue to make trouble. Even if the media blows over, they won't be able to stop privately. Is CEO Zhang's wife so tough? I heard that CEO Zhang did have an affair 2 years ago, but it was only when he came back from a business trip with the new secretary of his company. They hugged each other in the car ambiguously. In the end, it was discovered by his wife. I heard that CEO Zhang's secretary was dragged into the company by his wife when she was at work. She stripped the secretary's clothes in front of everyone and whipped the secretary. It was said that because she was naked at that time, even the flesh on her chest was smashed. Later, many policemen went to the scene to stop the matter. Otherwise, the secretary would have been beaten to death on the spot. Hearing this, Jinwan raised her brows thoughtfully. It seemed like she was indeed a vicious and merciless person, with a powerful background that no one dared to provoke. If this misunderstanding was not resolved, she would inevitably have to be careful in High City in the future. Isn't Feng Ling free in America? Do you want her to come back to accompany you for a few months? Xiaoba asked. No need. She's being detained by Nanheng and can't come at all. Besides, there's no need to look for her, just because there's a little danger. Then what should we do? Hire a few more bodyguards for you? Jinwan smiled as she glanced at Xiaoba. She then picked up the newspaper to take a look. In the newspaper, it appeared as though she had taken the initiative to hold CEO Zhang's hand. From this angle, she was smiling very brightly. Furthermore, she was sitting very close to CEO Zhang. It did appear as though they were intimate. She put down the newspaper again and said, "Help me make an appointment with CEO Zhang tonight. Tell him I'll wait for him at the KTV near our company." Xiaoba looked at her with a dumbfounded expression. What time is it now? Shouldn't we avoid arousing suspicion? You actually want me to help you make an appointment with CEO Zhang? And meet him personally? And at a place like KTV? Jinwan glanced at her. Can't you bring more people from the company with you? Minghai Company can be considered a stable business partner of ours. Firstly, I can't lose my reputation. Secondly, I can't destroy the contract between our two companies. I can't shed all pretense of cordiality with them. Then why are you doing this? Don't ask so much. Just do as I say. Xiaoba pursed her lips. If I help you make an appointment with CEO Zhang, he will definitely come. He won't care so much. In any case, even if he really has an affair, his wife will only teach him a lesson and won't do anything to him. I can tell that CEO Zhang has long been drooling over you. If he can do anything ambiguous with you, he will most likely be willing to come regardless of the risk. It's even better that he's willing to come. It saves us the trouble. Jinwan casually tossed the newspaper on her desk into the wastebasket. Just do as I say. Tonight, go to KTV with CEO Zhang. You can go back to work after making the appointment. Don't be affected by this matter. Xiaoba truly did not understand what Jinwan was thinking. However, when she thought about how Jinwan rarely suffered losses, she knew what she was doing. Furthermore, due to her beautiful face, many women were jealous of her. Not to mention the women in the country. Even when she was abroad, there would often be people gossiping about her behind her back. The tallest tree in the forest was the first to be destroyed by the wind. Those who stood too tall and were too beautiful would inevitably be provoked in the open. Then I'll send a few more bodyguards tonight. I'll also send some of the company's male employees. I'll also have a few assistants to go with you. There's no need to do that. Just call a few of the people who usually go with CEO Zhang when we discuss our cooperation. The most important thing is to be more natural. Don't make it seem like you're going to fight. All right. Could it be that they weren't going to fight? Xiaoba scratched her head. She saw the hot water bottle Jin Wan had placed on the sofa and walked over to pick it up. Boss, is your period coming today? Does your stomach hurt? Do you want me to help you brew some brown sugar water? All right. The hot water bottle is too heavy. I have a heating pad here for you to use. Jin Wan waved her hand. Go back to work first. Right now, I'm not as afraid of the cold as before. It doesn't hurt as much. I'll be fine after drinking some hot water. That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.